broke into the business right in Tampa, Florida. I was playing in a rock and roll band for 10 years, trying to avoid a real job. We played real loud rock and roll music, and I think we're about the hottest band in the Tampa Bay area. Tampa Bay also happened to be a hotbed for wrestling. The same with New York and Minneapolis. It was one of the biggest hotbeds. So all the wrestlers were around. I was a big wrestling fan. And there was a huge mystique with wrestlers back then. They were very protective of the business, and if you said it was fake, or if you told the guys, you know, nice show tonight, they'd punch you in the face. It was very different 20 years ago. And all of a sudden, these wrestlers started coming into the clubs I was playing because, like I said, we had the hot rock and roll band. The mystique wore off. I started talking with them. The next thing I knew, I started asking about the wrestling business because I was a fan. And before I knew it, I was at the Tampa Armory, they call the Sportatorium, working out, trying to break into the wrestling business my first day. And after they exercised me to death where I was ready to faint and I was seeing white and my knees were buckling, they got me in the ring, and Hiro Matsuda broke my leg. That's how I got in the wrestling business. I did not get a pair of boots from Santa. It wasn't easy. A lot of trials and tribulations. The first problem was money. Working so many times in 1 week, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 times in a week, sometimes twice a day. If you're taping TV, they'd want you to wrestle 3 or 4 times to get you on 3 or 4 tapes. At the end of the week, it translated into $100 or $125 for all that work. Needless to say, there wasn't enough money for food, shelter, training, vitamins, and even beer. So my buddy, Ed Leslie, who started out with me, he later became Brutus Beefcake, we used to live in my van. So for the first couple of years, we'd sleep in the van in the local parking lot of the deli or the bar or the apartment complex we could find, and wake up in the morning, rush to the nearest gas station, brush our teeth, and go to the restroom. And it was kind of tough at first, and it took a couple of years of living in the van to get to the point where we got enough respect, we knew the trade well enough, we could make $400 or $500 a week to get into an apartment or get into a hotel. And even back then, 20 years ago, $400 or $500 sounds like a lot of money, but it's not when you're on the road traveling and hotels and gas and cars breaking down. So it was tough at first, but, the strong survived, and we made it through the original tough times in the beginning. The Hulk Hogan character is impeccable, if we're talking about the character. It's much better than the man Terry Bollea, which is me. It's the best of the best of all the positive characters, and it was kind of stumbled upon. I started out wrestling around the Pensacola, Florida area, Georgia, Alabama area, and I happened to go stumble into a talk show to promote Mobile, Alabama. A local talk show, and Lou Ferrigno happened to be there. As I sat next to him on the set, everything worked out great. When I went back to the dressing room last night, all the guys in the dressing room said, "My God, you're bigger than Lou Ferrigno, the Incredible Hulk." So they started calling me Terry the Hulk Boulder. So the Hulk name kind of was sneaking into my stage name, Terry Boulder. As time went on, I was wrestling as a good guy. After I quit the wrestling business 2 or 3 different times because I wasn't making enough money, I kept going back to it, hoping I'd do better. The second or third time I quit, Vince McMahon Sr. called me. And when I went to New York to talk to him about wrestling in the big arenas in the Madison Square Garden promotion, he was real ethnic oriented. And he had Pedro Morales, Bruno Sammartino for the Italian Americans, Chief Jay Strongbow for the Indian Americans, Ivan Putski for the Polish type Americans. And he goes, "I want you to be Hogan." Okay, Hogan, why? Of course, for the Irish Americans, so it was Hulk Hogan. And the character as Hulk Hogan has always been a very positive character. The training, the prayers, and the vitamins, whether it was from the small promotions in the beginning with Terry the Hulk Boulder all the way to Hulk Hogan, the Madison Square Garden promotions, always been very popular. The name Hollywood Hogan came into play about 1994 when the ratings started flattening out. When Hulk Hogan would go on TV, you'd watch the quarter hours instead of the numbers jumping up when I came on this TV. They kind of flattened out, and it was because after seeing the shirt being ripped off for 15 years and the leg drop being ripped off for 15 years, America and the temperature of the wrestling business was kind of tired of it. Even my wife got tired of seeing the shirt ripped off. So I did the momentum shifting change, and I said the training, the prayers, and the vitamins, I did it for the money. And that Hollywood Hogan bad guy persona, holier than thou, better than you, my blood in my veins is better than yours. I body slammed Hollywood with all my B movies, the same way I body slammed the wrestling business. So the bad guy character of Hollywood Hulk Hogan came into place. As far as people that had great matches there were Andre the Giant, there was Paul Orndorff, there were people like Roddy Piper, but you didn't come out the same way you went in. I would go in there to work with Paul Orndorff, and he was so physical, and he would kick me in the back of the head and in the face so hard, I would come out swollen and beat up to where it was hard to get out of bed the next day. When I would wrestle Andre the Giant, for the first 7 or 8 years, he didn't like me very much. He was very protective of his big man aura, the big man territory. And I was trying to be a big man and trying to be a main eventer and trying to follow in his footsteps. I admired him so much, but he took it as a threat. And he used to take his open hand, and his little finger was twice as big as my thumbs put together. This guy was a real giant. Sometimes he was up near 700 pounds, depending on his diet and how much he drank and ate. And I mean, when he would hit you, I mean, it was brutal. I just molded my style, the Hulk Hogan persona, as the ultimate good guy. The McDonald's, Chevrolet, America, California, Broadband, USA, the California tan, Venice Beach has a certain mystique with California, USA. It's the land of opportunity. The Golden State at the time, before it was jaded, it was a wholesome place to, be from. That projected and that transcended my whole character. Hulk Hogan from Venice Beach, California, Americana all the way. It basically carried me through my career. Well, if I was a wrestling fan, I thought about Hulk Hogan's career. There's a couple moments that come to pass that are the most memorable moments of all times. For the old fans, the baby boomers who grew up with me, they definitely remember WrestleMania 3, or even WrestleMania 1 with Mr. T, but more than that, WrestleMania 3 with 94,000 people body slamming Andre the Giant. If you missed that era, or if you weren't alive back then, the baby boomers came back this year, in 2002, and they brought their kids with them. And the kids, and even the baby boomers, might remember WrestleMania 18, where I wrestled The Rock. And nobody predicted that the biggest superstar in this business, The Rock, who was on TV every week, was a household name, had major motion pictures coming out, would stand in the ring with what they would call an old-timer and get booed out of the building. There were 70,000 people in the Sky Dome that wanted Hulk Hogan to win. And even though the WWE didn't have me come out on top of the match, I won my fans back. So it was a situation that was just lopsided, and you would have to remember that. If I could be remembered as a guy that helped change wrestling and transcend wrestling into entertainment instead of this very barbaric beer-drinking, cigar-smoking level, that's all I need. I don't have to be remembered as the greatest wrestler ever, or, the guy that saved the world. Just if they could just give me those type of props, I mean, that's bigger than anything anybody could ask for. That's a big ego trip. If somebody, 100 years from now could say Hulk Hogan was the Muhammad Ali or the Babe Ruth of wrestling, that's huge. I don't even know if I deserve that, but that'd be a nice way to be remembered.
You know something, dude? You're facing the greatest wrestler of all times, Hulk Hogan, brother. So all I got to say is I hope you've trained, said your prayers, and eat your vitamins, because I'm taking no mercy. I'm not going to give you any quarter, brother. So what you going to do when the greatest wrestler of all times runs wild and destroys you? What you going to do?
If I had to pick one person out of everyone who helped me get to where I am today in this business, I mean, there's no question who it would be. It'd be Vince McMahon. As a businessman, he's black and white. On a personal level, he'd go a million miles for you on a personal level. He's the one that gave me the opportunity. He's the one that when I got lazy would kick me in the butt. He's the one that when I got lazy would talk in my ear. He's the one that really said, look over there, there's the vision, you can achieve it. Without him, I never would have had the success in this business. He's the single one person, even to this day, if I infringe on his friendship on a personal level. A lot of people don't understand this. You can actually make mistakes. You can actually abuse Vince McMahon, not intentionally. You can actually go above and beyond the bounds of what a friendship are on a personal level, and this guy understands human beings. That's why he's where he's at. Now, on a business level, some people say he's too aggressive. Some people say he'll do anything to win. That's all true, but that makes him a good businessman. Well, the popularity and the celebrity status that comes along with pro wrestling is a given. Once you're seen on TV, the public owns you. And you have to go through several stages. You have to be, first off, aware that it's happening and know how to handle it. You have to adjust to it and get used to it. And then the final stage is, thank God it's happening to me. Thank God it's still happening. Everybody that's on TV, their lives change. Once you're on TV as a wrestler, you're not allowed a private life anymore because you owe the fans. I mean, it's not punch out at 5 o'clock. When I leave the house at 5 o'clock, they don't go, hey, Terry, how you doing? I drive down the road, they go, hey, there's Hulk Hogan. So instead of saying, hey, what's going on, I go, hey, brother, what's happening? So you got to give them a little pizzazz. You owe it to the fans. The celebrity status of popularity will change your personal life and business life forever for the good. You have to roll with the momentum. It's good momentum, and you need to learn how to roll with it. I've seen a lot of guys be short with fans, for no reason. I mean, I've been trying to walk to the lobby, and all of a sudden they'll say my kid was playing volleyball at school. I got a phone call one time. I was in the middle of about 100 people, and all of a sudden I get this phone call from my wife. I pick it up. My son Nick was jumping up at the volleyball net on a hardwood floor, and somebody took his legs out from under him. He hit his head on the ground, and she's on the way there because he's still knocked out. Well, quick, I told everybody to get out of my way. And I couldn't explain to him my son was knocked out at the moment, and the ambulance wasn't there yet, and as I raced to my room to figure out what to do, I had people say, we didn't want your autograph anyway, we don't, whatever. You can't make everybody happy. But sometimes I see wrestlers that are good guys. I mean, even if we're going by the old mindset that bad guys don't sign autographs, I don't believe that's the case anymore. But even if we were going by that, the good guys still should sign autographs. I've seen a lot of very popular good guys just blow people off like they don't owe them anything. You owe these fans. Life on the road is tough. I mean, I come from a generation of wrestlers where sometimes we were working 60 to 90 days without a day off. You get depersonalized. You become a robot. You have a decision to make. Is it going to be food, sleep, or the gym? Well, I always chose the gym first. Food was second, and the sleep was the third priority. I probably had everything backwards, but it worked for me because I was the first one to train night and day. Now everybody does it. Life on the road is tough because when you're hurt, it's not like NFL football or basketball or baseball where you get your thumb all the way jammed back and you get to miss a game. If you're in the Philadelphia Spectrum at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it's sold out, and you get your thumb jammed back. Well, Madison Square Garden's that night, and it's sold out. The two-a-day type situation, or then even the next day. But even more intense is like when you're working 2-a-days and you're in the Philadelphia in the Garden. If you get hurt, you can't go in Madison Square Garden in front of 20,000 people. Go, we have an announcement to make tonight. Hulk Hogan hurt his pinky. He won't be here. People don't buy it. Wrestlers are like big kids. The pee-pee, poo-poo, ha-ha thing that I've experienced with my children, works in the locker room with wrestlers. My kids do the pee-pee, ha-ha jokes, and still to this day they'll laugh about it. They're 12 and 14 years old, and they'll see something funny or make a joke about it, they'll laugh about it. In the wrestling business, it's a little more serious. Jerry Lawler has a crown. He makes a mistake leaving it in the dressing room. Somebody does number 2 in the crown. It's pretty tough. Andre the Giant, who's a great friend. In Japan, I guess you would call it a rib. Some people would call it necessity. In Japan, they have very small molded bathrooms because the rooms are small, and the shower and the sink and toilet are all made out of one mold. Well, I can barely sit on the toilet. I can't sit in the shower because the shower head hits me in the belly button, And so poor Andre, if Andre had to lay the newspaper out in the bed and go to the bathroom, well, there's a poo-poo story for you. But, I mean, that's a rib to me, to see a couple Japanese maids come in and, think that Mr. Ed just went to the bathroom on the bed. It's kind of hee-hee, ha-ha, poo-poo, but it's kind of funny, stuff like that. A lot of people in my business know that the matches are predetermined. Not people, but everybody knows that. The fans know that matches are predetermined, and some of the greatest jokes or ribs in this business are sending 2 wrestlers out to the ring with different finishes. Sending you out the ring saying, I want you to beat Hulk Hogan in 10 minutes, and sending Hulk Hogan out the ring saying, we want Hulk to beat you in 10 minutes, and seeing 2 guys fight for their lives out there to try to beat each other. That can be kind of comical. The jokes go on and on. I mean, Harley Race, great friend of mine, all of a sudden you'll be, driving kind of fast down the interstate, going 80 miles an hour. You've been driving for 4 hours, and all of a sudden at 80 miles an hour, there's a car behind you pushing you down the interstate. I mean, it's kind of dangerous, but wrestlers are big kids, and sometimes they have fun, and it's not very safe fun. The major injuries in this sport are just common. I mean, they're just the common injuries. A lot of people think that wrestling is choreographed. A lot of people think that wrestling is fake. Those adjectives don't work for me. You know, I do see guys talking. I never talk. At WrestleMania 18, in the middle of the afternoon, I went to the building at 2 in the afternoon. There were like 10 wrestlers in the ring, walking around in the ring, talking. You know, I didn't say anything to The Rock except, hey, I'll see you out there, brother. You know, that's it. You know, we knew what the finish was, so there's nothing to talk. It's like dancing. If you're really good at this, and you really know what you're doing out there, you listen with your heart and your ears and what the fans want to see, not what you can try. Because if it doesn't work out there, then it's just another match on a card, not a match that steals the show. Fake means to me that we don't get hurt. Just because the finish is predetermined doesn't mean that what we do in the ring is fake, because the injuries are there. You can hit a guy too hard in the back of the neck and pinch a nerve and make his arm go numb and shrink up, such as what happened to Paul Orndorff. Guys break their necks like Chris Benoit. Certain guys have died in the ring because elbows have been dropped and crushed their ribs. Every night I go out there, my main goal is to try not to get hurt. And if the other guy doesn't hurt me, I'm clumsy enough, I ended up tripping over my own feet. I was actually waiting for the Undertaker or somebody to come to the ring the other night. As I was shaking my arms, I hit my other arm and jammed my own thumb. Ouch, like an idiot. I mean, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but, you know, the injuries are there. I mean, my biceps are torn. All my biceps are torn. My trap's torn. When I went to slam Andre the Giant, when I got him here, he was too heavy. And because of 94,000 people need adrenaline, I went, and I turned him. My whole back from under my armpit ripped and fell down to my waist. I tore my lat muscle, which I never got fixed. So if I was a bodybuilder and I was posing, there's a huge hole under this armpit. The injuries were always there. If I had to give advice to somebody that wanted to get into this business, first off, they need to be possessed with it. It needs to be their every waking thought. And the other thing is, no matter what your situation is, make sure you're ready to give it all up. If you've got a good job, you need to give it up. If you've got a wife, and you've got kids, and you've got family, you need to give that up too. Because it's hard to make it in this business when you're running against people that have it in their blood, second or third generation wrestlers, people that all they have done is dedicate their life to amateur wrestling to get into this business. You got to kind of be ready to devote everything to wrestling and make everything else your second priority. And then if you are made of that and you can emotionally divorce yourself from everything in this world that you have had and make wrestling your number one priority emotionally and physically, then you might have a chance to make it.
Well, I think most people realize that the gimmick that I've used throughout my career has been the King. Jerry the King Lawler, known worldwide. The man that I first got the crown and robe from originally was a guy by the name of Bobby Shane, and he was wrestling as King Bobby Shane back in the 70s. And I wound up with his crown and his robe after Bobby Shane died in a plane crash. For a long time, I of course, being from Memphis, Tennessee, called myself the King of Memphis. And I guess that was because Memphis is sort of famous for being the home of kings. Elvis Presley was from Memphis. And so so that there was no confusion, I made everybody in my own hometown know that I was the King of Memphis, not Elvis. I'd been a wrestling fan all my life, and my next-door neighbor, Mike Mashburn, and I would wrestle around my house, and we didn't have mats, we didn't have a ring or anything like that. We just go out in the backyard and wrestle. I guess it was the early days of backyard wrestling. And finally one day I met another young guy named Jerry Vickers who came along, and he told me about some what we called in those days, I guess, outlaw wrestling matches. Just a little small independent organization that was run by an old ex-wrestler. I remember Jerry said, whatever you do, don't tell him you've never had a match, because he won't use you. He said, you know, just tell him that you've wrestled some down in Florida or somewhere. And so that's what happened. Met the promoter, and first question he asked me was, you know, how many matches you had? And I said, just a few. Wrestled some down in Florida. And then, of course, he caught me in the lie by asking me who the promoter was in Florida that I wrestled for. I had no idea. But I was also working at a radio station at the time, and I was a DJ, and I instead of getting blown off, I promised the guy that if I could get the opportunity to wrestle, that I could plug his matches on the radio without him having to pay for it. So next thing you know, I was booked in my first match in West Memphis, Arkansas. And Jackie Fargo was more or less my mentor. He was a big fan favorite. He was a hero throughout the Memphis and Mid-South area, and he was my favorite wrestler to watch. And then it was just like to actually finally get to meet Jackie and get to know him. And Jackie was the guy who stuck his neck out for me after I'd started wrestling over in the little small organization in West Memphis, Arkansas. Jackie stuck his neck out and went to the main promoter there in Memphis, who was a guy by the name of Nick Goulas, and said, "Nick, I got a kid down here that I think you should take a look at." I was known more or less as a guy that would be a fighter more so than a wrestler. And my big move that I perfected over the years, and that was my finishing maneuver, finishing hold, so to speak, was the pile driver. And that really came into prominence when I used it on Andy Kaufman, and it caught on. It was seen all around the world, and so I started using the pile driver then as my, the King's, when the King put a pile driver on somebody, that was definitely the end of the match. It's funny, still to this day, when people talk about Jerry the King Lawler, hardcore wrestling fans and people that are just casual wrestling fans and people that really don't even know much at all about wrestling still know and think of my most famous or infamous match as being the match that I had with Andy Kaufman. And, of course, Andy Kaufman wasn't a wrestler. He was the Latka, the star of the TV show Taxi at the time, and had been on, in all sorts of comedy shows, Saturday Night Live and that sort of thing. And Andy was a huge wrestling fan, and he fancied himself a wrestler, but, of course, he didn't think he was tough enough to wrestle men, so he challenged women to wrestling matches and declared himself the intergender wrestling champion. And so Andy came down to Memphis, and basically all Andy wanted to do was wrestle a woman in front of a wrestling crowd. He did that. He fell in love with it. Andy actually once told me, he said, "I would give up everything that I'm doing in Hollywood, give up Taxi, all the comedy clubs, anything, if I could just stay involved with wrestling." That's how much he loved it. So I came up with the idea. I basically was trying to get the rub off of Andy Kaufman. I came up with the idea that Andy have his first ever match with a man, and that man was going to be me. And so that's how that match came about. Andy got a couple of pile drivers from me in that match, and he wound up spending 3 days in traction in a hospital here in Memphis. And that news and the footage of that match went out all over the world. It was on the front page of the New York Times. And eventually, of course, Andy and I wound up on the David Letterman show. And I like to think that Andy and I broke a lot of ground. We set some trends there. I think Jerry Springer might have been in the audience that night and realized that he was seeing a good thing when I became the first ever talk show guest to strike another guest on network television. Because that's where, we ended up slapping Andy's face, knocked him right out of his chair in front of David Letterman. David had no idea what was taking place. He was in shock. The whole audience was in shock. The world was in shock. That was recently voted by Entertainment Weekly as one of the top 100 moments in the history of television. So without a doubt, that's probably the most famous match or the best-known match that I've ever been involved in. Because you still see it 20 years later. They show it like once a week on Comedy Central. It's on A&E. It's on the E! Network. And, of course, we made a movie about it, Man on the Moon, starring Jim Carrey and yours truly as the King. Well, let me just say this about this match that we're going to have tonight. You are in a world of trouble because you have put your name on the dotted line to step into the ring with the King of Wrestling. That's right, me, Jerry the King Lawler. And what I'm going to do to you tonight is not going to be a pretty sight. I don't know if you've ever seen your own blood, but it makes a man feel different about himself when he looks down and realizes that blood is oozing out of his head. That's what's in store for you tonight. When we get through with that match, you're going to realize once and for all why all the world calls me the King. And that's a promise. Well, today, the King is still the King. I still don the crown, step into the ring 3 times a week. Like I said, you can tell by the black eyes. I still get knocked around. Still love that. Ever since 1994, of course, I've been with the World Wrestling Entertainment and I co-host the most successful wrestling show in the history of cable television. I'm on Monday Night Raw along with good old Jim Ross every every week, and I still wrestle in the WWE. I wrestle a lot of independent shows around the country. In my spare time, when I'm not wrestling, a lot of people don't realize it, but I'm quite an artist, and I like to paint and do my artwork. I play ball every single week, either football or softball in the summer. I have a team called Lawler's Army that we've gone out and played benefit softball games and played in leagues for about 30 years now. A bunch of the same guys still on the team, and so I still enjoy doing that. I guess the only thing that's associated with the business that I don't enjoy as much as I used to is the travel. Getting to and from these shows and these matches. That's not nearly as much fun as it was in the early years. But as far as that, I'm still pretty active and still hanging in there and trying to hang with those young guys. I've done just about everything in this business. I came from a non-wrestling background. I had no relative of mine whatsoever ever in the history of the business. I was the first one out of my family to get started in wrestling, and went from that to being a referee, helping set up the ring when I first started, doing actual wrestling, being a promoter, owning a wrestling company, doing announcing, commentating for the biggest wrestling company in the world. You name it in this business, I've done it. And so that's, I guess, what I would like to be remembered as, a guy sort of like a Renaissance man that did a little bit of everything connected with the business. If I knew someone that wanted to get in the business, what advice would I give to them? Don't do it. We got enough wrestlers already. We don't need the competition. No, I don't know. Usually, that is a question that I get asked almost on a daily basis. That's the most frequent thing that wrestlers are asked. How can I get in the business? What can I do to be a wrestler? Because, like I said, it is so glamorous. It does look like it's an easy thing, and it does look like something that, and it is, in a sense, something that's very rewarding, very much. It's a fun career. It's a great way to make a living, and so it's no surprise that there are guys out there that would want to know how to get involved with it. It's just very difficult to give them an answer, because there's I don't know of any two wrestlers that get into business the same way. Now we're looking at guys like Kurt Angle, who came from the Olympics, winning an Olympic gold medal to professional wrestling. We've got guys like Brock Lesnar, who's NCAA champion now, in the WWE. We got all sorts of guys getting in the business all sorts of different ways. I wouldn't necessarily, unless I looked at somebody and just, if they were probably too old to get started, or if they had a family where they weren't going to be able to make the sacrifices without it costing them their family life, or if they just weren't big enough, that sort of thing. Those kind of people, I would just say, I would look for something else to do if I were you. But other than that, I just tell them, hey, if you got a dream, go for it. I don't know where you go for it, but just like I did, persevere, get out there. You don't sit around and wait for somebody like Vince McMahon to come up and knock on your door and say, hey, I want you, because that ain't going to happen. You're going to have to go out there and knock those doors down yourself.
Well, my musical career started in Memphis, Tennessee at Treadwell High School. We formed a group called the Gentrys. We had a million-seller record called Keep On Dancing, Keep On Doing the Jerk. We toured with the Beach Boys, Sonny and Cher. I was a friend of Jerry the King Lawler's in Memphis, Tennessee, and I went to Treadwell High School. He went to Treadwell High School. Jerry got into the world of wrestling. So as the years went by, I became a big wrestling fan, and he always liked the music from the 60s. So one day, he gave me a call. He was going to do a local record with a group in town. So they asked me would I like to sing backup on this particular song. So Jerry and I got together, and he said, Jimmy, you were a great athlete in school. You played baseball and basketball and football. And he said, every week we play softball. He goes, would you like to come out and play? So I started playing softball with him on Sunday. One thing led to another. He said, I know you do the music for us and everything else, but would you like to maybe manage me? And I thought, oh, my gosh, it was a dream come true for me, because I'd always loved professional wrestling. So I started managing Jerry the King Lawler. Was the first guy I ever really managed. So that's how I really got into the wrestling business, was through Jerry Lawler. I've managed the Honky Tonk Man, the Hart Foundation, which is Bret Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, the Rougeau brothers, Raymond Rougeau, and, of course, Jacques Rougeau, and also managed Jacques is the Mountie. I had King Kong Bundy. I had Terry Funk and Dory Funk, Ted DiBiase, Irwin R. Shyster. I've managed the Nasty Boys. I mean, it's just been so many. But the ones I like the most, I think, of course, managing Hulk Hogan was great. The Hart Foundation was tremendous. Some of the people that we like to go against was, of course, the British Bulldogs. The Bulldogs always loved to play ribs on everybody. I mean, the first time Jerry Lawler first came up to the WWF, his crown was sitting in the dressing room. And I can't say they were really responsible for it, but somebody went and took a poop in Jerry's crown. When Jerry got ready to go to the ring and looked into it, of course, he couldn't wear it out there. But, you know, to this day, nobody knows who it was. Was it the Bulldogs? Was it the Hart Foundation? Was it Kurt Hennig? You know, I guess maybe one day when wrestling finally closes the curtain on the final chapter, maybe whoever did it will come out and tell the truth. There's so many crazy things that I've done in professional wrestling. Of course, when I was in New York with the WWF, I dressed up as Peggy Sue with Honky Tonk Man against George the Animal Steel, which he proceeded to rip my bra off, my pantyhose off, so that was kind of crazy. That was in the WWF. In the WCW, I kind of had a crazy match where I wore a chicken outfit if I had lost a match, which I lost, of course, and wore the chicken outfit. And, of course, in Memphis, Tennessee, there were so many crazy matches I was in. Of course, I tagged up with Andy Coppin, the late, great Andy Coppin. I was the partner one time with Jesse the Body Ventura, you know, the governor of Minnesota, and we fought Jerry Lawler and the San Diego Chicken. So through my career, it's been so many crazy, wild matches and things that I've done, it's hard to really just decide on one. Since I was never really a wrestler, I was in the matches a lot, you know, with Andy Coppin and people like that. But the only belt I really ever held was the Southern Handicap Championship belt. And I guess the reason why they call it a handicap belt, because if you ever saw me in the ring and wrestle, you would know. I mean, I don't know how to drop an arm lock or drop kick or anything else. You know, I've always just been able to just go in there and kind of freelance. My favorite move was running, because by me not being a great athlete or a professional wrestler, my feet was probably my greatest asset, because when I got into trouble, whether it was fighting Jerry the King Lawler or Handsome Jimmy Valiant or any of the guys in Memphis, or even going up against Hulk Hogan or Bret Hart after our Jimmy Hart had turned on him with the First Family, it was feet don't fail me now. That was my great thing about me. I was really quick in the ring, able to get in and out of the ring, stay away from trouble. One of my on-time matches in Memphis, Tennessee was Jackie Fargo. You know, Jackie Fargo was such a legend back then, and Jerry Lawler and I both grew up watching Jackie Fargo, so I think the match I had against Jackie Fargo will always stand out in my mind. By the way, he beat me about 20 seconds. You know, he wrapped me up like a pretzel. You know, so it was great. Well, the Mouth of the South, along with a couple other guys, have put together a brand new wrestling company out of Universal Studios called the XWF. The jury's still out whether we'll ever get on TV or not, or ever make this thing happen. But Rowdy Roddy Piper's with us, Sable. We've got Bobby the Brain Heenan, Kurt Hennig. Even Hulk Hogan's on some of our tapes with Jerry the King Lawler. We got a lot of fresh young talent, too. So hopefully we got our fingers crossed that one day you'll be able to flip that old boob tube on and see the XWF. Brian Shields gave me a call along with a guy named Rick Fox. They're my favorite tag team at Acclaim. I want you to know that right now. So they kind of got together, and Brian had known I'd done a little bit of music for WCW and the WWF, and I'd mentioned that. He got a hold of Tricky Ricky Fox, and he gave us a call, and we were able to put some things together for him. And so far, you know, they've liked it very much. But it's kind of unique. I go back and like to look at the matches, and some of the theme songs we used back then, and it kind of helps me with an idea on what we need to create. That we have a little piece of the past, but still a little piece of the future mixed together. Who's the smartest man in professional wrestling, and why am I? You know why? Because Jimmy Hart has managed some of the biggest names in this great sport. And like I always say, never trust a midget. Music is so much a part of life. You know, it's if you go to a funeral, they have music to make you cry. If you go to church on Sunday, you know, the music's there to kind of bring you up and lift your spirits. If you're on the elevator, you hear music. If you're in a restaurant, you hear music, and the sign just fell. We did hits like Buff Bagwell's Buff Daddy, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall's song that we had for them, that, and I just blew that. Start this over again. I'm so sorry. Damn it. I'm sorry. Hang on. What, Mike? What? When you've managed people like Hulk Hogan, the Hart Foundation, the Nasty Boys, Greg the Hammer Valentine, the Road Warriors, when you've Let me start over. I'm so sorry. Hang on. I'm sorry that the thing bled through the walls. Who is the smartest man in professional wrestling, and why am I? Because you see, I've named the biggest. One more time. No, that's okay. I thought. Thank you for just. These walls are so thin anyhow. You think you're talking to Bobby the Brain Heener or to Mr. Fuji, or you? Let me start over one more time. I'm sorry. Hey, Mike. You're not going to step on me, baby. You know why? Because never trust them. Let me do this over. If I got to do it faster, hang on, let me get something like that here. Because we shouldn't be much longer. Thank you. Hey, I'm the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, the world's greatest wrestling manager. And if you don't believe me, one more time. I mean, you can talk on the phone, just not real loud. Thank you. Hey, I'm the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, the world's greatest wrestling manager. And if you don't believe it, just ask me. Jimmy Hart gave us our money's worth. He was entertaining. And what are you going to do when the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, and Hulk Hogan run wild on you? He was flamboyant. This is Jimmy Hart right up here, looking so cool and so sharp. He was wild. He was crazy. It's great. He was silly. He was stupid. Of course, there's the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. He was funny. He broke our hearts. He made us cry. He made us laugh. But you know what? He gave us our money's worth.
I really kind of think that I always wanted to wrestle. I admired my father when I was a kid. I loved the people that he was around and that I were around as a child, and just grew up in it. The truly memorable times that I truly, truly, truly loved were the times that I spent with my brother and my father. In the ring, on the road, and just being together. It was great times in my life, My pop was a special person. He really was. And my brother was as good of a wrestler that you could get for a partner in the ring. And he was a great performer, and I think that we had a mix that was good in the ring, that was successful all over the United States and Japan, and along with my father, too. Holds. Dean Malenko didn't invent the Texas Clover hold. I wonder where it got the name Texas if Dean Malenko is from Florida. The Texas Clover hold was kind of my name and invention. Did it over in Japan. Malenko happened to be over there one time, and I was wrestling over there. That's where he saw the old Texas Clover hold. Another hold that I really liked using that was quite different from everybody else was the rolling leg splits, which is something that I kind of coined over a period of time that you don't even hardly see in the business anymore. And of course, the spinning toe hold. Made a lot of fellas wince on that one. Achievements that I've accomplished, belts that I've accomplished, gosh, I don't know. I was NWA World's Champion. I was WWF World's Tag Team Champion. I was the World Tag Team Champion before, the International Tag Team Champions before, along with my brother, Brass Knucks Champion, Western States Champion. Hell, I've been around so long. United States Champion, Florida State Champion, Southern States Champion. I don't know. It just goes on and on and on and on. Memorable matches, my gosh. Harley Race, my God, how many times have I wrestled him and had great matches, Memorable matches are with Cactus Jack over there in Japan, Onita, blowing up rings, Cactus Jack and ECW, and burning down the arena just practically, and damn near dying that night, caught myself on fire, burnt myself up. 90-minute match with Sabu and Shane Douglas in the first three-way. up there in ECW. You know, all of those were memorable. The many, many matches that I had with Johnny Valentine, that was such a great performer, that is now gone, you know. Memorable matches are with Iron Mike DiBiase whenever I was just a kid, and he took me in there like a baby and led me around the ring and taught me a great deal. Those things that you can't separate all of those. You know, memorable matches were with Jumbo Tsuruta in Japan, Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody. I mean, how can I say one is better than the other? The odds of being a top professional wrestler are pretty horrific at this time. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it for the enjoyment of it. But if you've got a job, don't go off half-cocked and say, I'm going to be a professional wrestler and I'm off on the road and I've got a chance to go here. Stick with that job. And if a true opportunity arises, and you'll know if it's true, with a major group or an organization, whether it's in Japan or the United States, you'll know if it is by the money. Well, if that opportunity arises, well, then you might try it. But, boy, don't just go jumping off the deep end. And that's the best advice I can give you. And all you kids out there, get your education first before you go jumping off and trying something like professional wrestling. Get that education. No matter what you're doing or what you want to do, get that education. It goes a long ways. If I had it to do over again, I wouldn't change much. There was a lot of wonderful things about driving down the road and making $25. The money wasn't good, but the times were great. Old Funk was worth the price of a ticket. That's how I want to be remembered. Had my knees operated on 4 or 5 times, had my elbow operated on, broke my neck. My back looks like crap, had no telling how many, both shoulders knocked down, no telling how many concussions. And just everything. I probably had, God only knows how many stitches. How many stitches should I have had? About 1,000 more than what I did, because I just become an expert at it. I've sewed up my own, but then along came super glue. Super glue is the greatest thing I ever invented for wrestlers. Super glue, and well, it was for me and Sabu. I don't know about the rest a lot, but we use super glue, and tape things up. About the best way to do it. One of the big things about me is, it's like my knee bothers me so much that if I don't really concentrate, I walk with a pretty bad limp, And what really pisses me off is whenever somebody comes up to me and says, hey, Terry, you're walking with a pretty bad limp. I say, goddamn, what's wrong with you saying that? And I'll straighten up, and I'll walk real good then for a while, but I do walk with a bad limp, But it pisses me off when somebody says, boy, you sure, hey, what are you doing there, Gimpy? Or something like, you son of a bitch, I'm goddamn knock you out. Harlingen, Kentucky was a memorable match with the Fullers. And I'm just talking about crazy stuff that makes them memorable, but, great matches, I can go into that too, but Harlingen was funny because I went ahead and I said to people, I made an interview like I am here right now, but I was talking about the miners, in Harlan, Kentucky, and I said that all you idiots go down in that mine, you sit there and you drink coffee all day and play like you work, rub a little coal on your faces, and I said, here I am in Texas, and I had this tractor out there driving around on a tractor. I said, I work, I got dirt underneath my fingernails, I'm not some son of a bitch on welfare. Well, I didn't sit too well with them because whenever we got to Harlingen, they had all of the police there, and I was wondering what they were there for, but they were there searching the people on the way in the ring. And they took away like 44 guns that they had going to the ring, you know, that they had on them. Harlan's a pretty rough town, so went ahead and took those guns away from them, you know, and some guy came up behind me and a police officer stopped him, and he had a big old knife about like that. And my wife and I thought we'd escape this place pretty fine, you know. Got my pay for the night and got to rent a car, and we're taking off, you know, and heading back. As we were heading back out of Harlan there, as they went ahead and some guy got on a mountain road, and here comes this truck, well, this guy in a truck, you know, a couple of guys in a truck, you know, and one of them had a gun, you know, and they were coming after us, you know, and they went ahead and fired at us, and my wife went ahead and I thought she was looking in the compartment, but what she was doing is she was trying to crawl through the floorboard of the front seat of the car there. But we made it out of that deal. Had one with Wahoo McDaniels one time. The late Wahoo McDaniels, who I really love and think was a wonderful guy. But we were wrestling in Corpus Christi, Texas. And I was in the ring with Wahoo, and a riot broke out, and fought my way back to the dressing room, and it has nothing to do with in the ring, but what makes it memorable is I fought my way all the way down the aisle and back up to the dressing room door, and I turned around, I looked back at Wahoo, and I turned back around and looked and see where in the hell he was, and about that time I felt something stick me, you know. I thought, what in the hell is that? Somebody hit me in the neck. I reached up there, and I thought, well, some son of a bitch has thrown a dart. So I looked back at Wahoo. I said, you see that, Indian, you know, because I felt it up there, and I just left it there. And I said, see that? I said, that's goddamn well tough, you son of a bitch. And I went on back into the dressing room, you know, and I thought, well, here I'm going back in the dressing room, and I looked in the dadgum mirror there, and holy shit, I had a knife sticking in my neck. It wasn't a dart, it was a knife that somebody had thrown. And it just missed my carotid artery about that far. I can go back a few years, you know, I'll give you a couple of great ribs that my father did that I thought were the greatest ribs in the world, you know. I mean, I don't know how great they were. But there was this one fella, and he was down in the Amarillo Territory at the time, and his name was Benny Trudel. And Benny Trudel was this little French wrestler, French-Canadian, you know. Talked with a very heavy accent. And Benny was not the greatest wrestler, and he wrestled a lot of preliminary matches. And about 50% of the time, he refereed those matches, you know. And my father used to constantly rib Benny, you know. And Benny thought my father was the funniest person in the world. Oh, Dory, you're so funny, you know. And my father did some terrible stuff to him, but one of the ribs, you know, they'd go down the road, and hitchhikers were always a wonderful thing, you know, to drive crazy, because you're going down a road, and back at that time, you know, even whenever I first got into business, people were hitching on rides, thumbing those rides, you know. And my father used to take great pride in being able to go ahead, you know, and all the wrestlers see how many times they could make a hitchhiker run, you know, by pulling over, come on, you know. Well, one day my father's driving down the road, and Benny's riding with him, keeping him company, you know. They were kind of riding mates back in, I guess you would call it. He's driving down the road, and here's a hitchhiker, and Dory, pull over, drive that hitchhiker nuts, you know. Dory, pull over, see if we can make him run. Father said, okay, Benny. So they pull up about 100 yards in front of the hitchhiker and stop. Say, come on, we'll give you a lift. So here comes the hitchhiker, you know. He starts out, and he's walking on up there and getting closer and closer, and he gets about 10 yards from the car there. And it just about he gets about 10 yards from the car, they start rolling the car forward, you know, and hitchhiker starts going a little bit faster, you know. Pretty soon, here he gets him going. He get that hitchhiker. Oh, Dory, he's running now, Dory, you know. But Father's driving down the road, and then he'd go ahead and stop again. A guy'd quit. He'd go ahead and tell a guy, come on again, you know. Oh, Dory, he's running. Yeah. Well, this one day they did that to this hitchhiker. They did it about 2 or 3 times. You know, yeah. Dory, see if you can make him do it one more time. My father said to Benny, he said, Benny, he says, what would really be funny is if you would pull down your pants and put your ass in the window just about, he said, about when a guy gets about 10 yards from here, he said, that would be real funny. And Benny says, oh, Dory, he said, that would be so funny. Go ahead and do that. So they got the hitchhiker all chummed up and everything. The hitchhiker's about 10 yards from up there. Benny goes ahead and he puts his ass in the window. And he's got his ass in the window, and Benny's there like, ha, 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 Dory. Here he comes, Dory. Let's go, Dory. Come on, Dory. We got to go, Dory. About that time, my father, instead of driving away with Benny with his ass in the window, he just turned around and held his shoulders in the window of the car there. And he's pushing him in the window like that. And the hitchhiker comes up there, and he starts hitting Benny in the ass with both fists as hard as he could. But that's the kind of ribs. But they were all good, wonderful ribs, and it just was crazy stories in this business, They had this one guy, Mel Dupree, that was up here in Amarillo. And they went ahead, he used to wear white trunks, but the bear was in the town that night, so they squirted a bunch of honey down the goddamn tights, and he didn't know it, they squirted honey on his tights. The bear went in the ring, and it was like a battle royal with a bear in it. Well, that bear got him down on the goddamn mat so fast because bears are real strong, and the fans were out there wondering what the hell is going on, but he went right, could smell that honey, went right for him, threw him down on the mat, and he took it. He had damn bear's tongues about that long, and he just kept on licking his ass for about 5 minutes. People went nuts. What the hell? Every time he'd get up and get away, and the bear would catch him again, go to licking his ass again. Johnny Valentine was a great ribber, but sometimes some of his ribs were very mean, And we were in the battle royal one night, and Joe Blanchard came back here and said, Dynamite, said, boy, I want you to stay in that battle royal as long as you can. That Dynamite says, okay. He said, I'll stay in there as long as I can, Joe. So Johnny went ahead and he had what you call oil of mustard. And it's this oil that just, you used to be able to get it at a drugstore. But if you squirt it on, what they use it for, they use it to squirt on dogs that are running around your house, and can't get rid of, and it goes on to them in about 15 minutes, it's like turns into fire on them. They run like hell and don't ever come back, That's what they use it for. But Johnny got some of this stuff, and he was going into the overtop battle royal, Dynamite was, and Johnny shot him on the ass with that oil of mustard before he went into the ring. So Dynamite went out of the ring. It just take like 15 minutes, and boy, you could just almost put a clock to it, So he shot him about 5 minutes before he went to the ring with that oil of mustard, and then it was going into the match here, and Dynamite was in the ring, and all of a sudden about the 10 minutes went by, it made 15 minutes total, and Dynamite was in the ring in the battle royal, and all of a sudden he got down on his ass and started scooting around the goddamn mat like he had worms, like a dog with worms. And then all of a sudden he was rubbing his ass like that, And it's over. Then it's over the top rope battle royal, so then he just took off running the damn ropes and just leaped over the top rope and ran right back into the damn dressing room, And Joe Blanchard came back. He ran right to the dressing room, right in the bathroom, pulled down his pants and stuck his ass right in the commode, Got his ass. It burns that bad. He's cooling his ass off. Joe Blanchard came back here like he was real mad. He knew Johnny was going to do that to him. Joe said, Dynamite, why in the hell did you stay in the ring any longer than what you did? And Dynamite says, my ass. He says, my ass. It was on fire. It was on fire. I think that's funny. Nobody else does. Jerry Graham came into the Amarillo territory whenever Dusty Rhodes and I were here. And Dusty and I, Jerry Graham was crazier than a house rat, at this time, as he was in, this is whenever he was in Phoenix, Arizona, and his mother passed away. And she passed away in this hospital, And you got to remember, Jerry Graham was about 350 pounds, and he was a wrestler at that time, but he was nuts. Dr. Jerry Graham. And he went up there to the hospital in Phoenix, Arizona to get his mom out of the hospital. And whenever he got up there, they found out that she had passed away in the hospital. So Jerry Graham went ahead and he got in the room, and he went crazy when he got in the room, and he just picked his mama up on his shoulder, And he went carrying her out of the hospital on his shoulder. Well, whenever he went carrying her out there, here comes these guards, and he's got his mom on his shoulder, and he's fighting off the guards and blowing up, and he'd set his mother down, and he'd fight some more guards off, and pick his mother back up, and fighting and running, and pretty soon he finally got to the elevator, and shoved the guards off of the damn elevator and went in, got it down to the first floor, and the interns were all trying to stop him. And he was making his way, he made his way out the front of the damn door, and there he was, and here comes the cops, and the cops were about to get him just about the time he got to his car, so he grabbed his mother, off his shoulder, and he body slammed her on the hood of the car, The cops beat him over the head with a billy club until he was already senseless. He was looking for a place to go, and Dusty and I found that out, so we asked my dad if he'd bring him into here, And my father said, all right, if you and Dusty will take care of him, make sure he doesn't get into any shit. So we said, oh, yeah, we'll do that for sure, So things were going pretty good, but he got into a lot of shit. But one of the things he got into is Dusty is going down to Littlefield, Texas. Going down to wrestle. We go by Buffalo Lake, and Dusty is going down there. But anyhow, Dusty forgot and left a shotgun. He always tried to get the guns out before, crazy Dr. Jerry would go ahead and get in the car for the ride, on down there, And he was managing Dusty at the time, And on the way down there was about halfway down to Littlefield there is, well, first of all, Dusty stopped and opened up the trunk, Whenever he went to get some gas and move the bags around, Jerry saw the gun, Oh, boy, a gun. He shoot some ducks on the way down, It's Littlefield, there's ducks all the way along the way, Shoot some ducks. So they're driving down there, and some ducks on a little pond. And Jerry Graham said, Dusty said, shoot the ducks. Well, shoot the goddamn ducks. Shoot the ducks. Dusty said, man, he said, look at them. He said, they're 100 yards out. Dusty said, he said, look at those ducks there. He said, they're 100 yards out in the water out there. He said, we can't shoot them, Jerry. He said, we're going to get all wet if we got to go get them things. Jerry said, shoot the ducks. Shoot them way out there. He said, shoot them out there. He said, I'll get them. So Dusty said, okay, Jerry. He said, that's the way you want it. He said, okay. So he goes ahead and he shoots out there, and one of the ducks falls, goes down, it's 100 yards out in the water. So no sooner had he shot the duck and the duck's in the water, Jerry Graham, middle of the winter, Jerry Graham opens up the other car door over there, runs around the car, goes ahead and runs out in the water, dives in the goddamn water, goes ahead and swims out there to where the fence posts are, does like a surface dive under the fence post, comes up on the other side, swims out to the duck, gets the duck in his mouth, and swims it all the way back. Swear to God, this guy was nuttier than a fruitcake. He gets back like that, and he dropped it down there at Dusty's feet and shook himself off like that. And Dusty said, Jack, you're not getting in my goddamn car with all of that shit all over you. He says, you're going to have to run until you dry. So Dusty goes ahead and gets the car going. And here's Jerry Graham on the side of the road there, running along with his suit. He had a suit on whenever he jumped in the water. His suit's all wet and wrinkled and everything else. And he's running. He's about 400 pounds and fat. And finally, just barely going, you know. And Dusty finally felt sorry for him, you know. That's after about 30 yards. Dusty finally felt sorry for him. Jerry, get your ass in this car. Jerry said, no, Dusty, he says, got to run till I'm dry. Got to run till I'm dry. Dusty finally got in. Oh, God, Jerry Graham stories. A lot of wonderful, crazy stories about this business. Could go on forever. Not just Jerry Graham stories, but just wonderful ones.
I've been wrestling now for 23 years. I started bodybuilding in Honolulu, Hawaii, where all the professional wrestlers used to come and work out at. And actually, that's how I really got started out in. And there was a guy named Johnny Baran, Handsome Johnny Baran, they call himself. And I used to come out there and work out a lot. And of course, this is where all the professional wrestlers used to come out, and that's how I got involved in it. I always wanted to be the best. I always wanted to climb the highest peak, wherever it is, especially in the profession. If there's a ring that's in a certain level, that's high and everything else. And then when it became a time when they had a cage match, then I just went, whoa, okay. Now we're reaching, a different level here. And but yes, sir, the higher the mountain, the cooler the breeze, and that's where I would like to be. I have probably 1,000 moves, but my most important move is the Superfly. Splashing them, getting on top of the cage and just come down and just crashing the guy. When I got involved in professional wrestling, I thought, I would try something like this from the top of the rope. And when it became something that was successful for me, then I called it the Superfly. Actually, there might be the target, but actually I'm the one that has to be in control to make sure that everything's okay. Meaning as make sure that when I do land on them, I don't have to put them away for good, but just, temporary only. It was in a cage match in the Madison Square Garden, and that was against Don Morocco. Normally, I don't keep, tracks of the heights of the cages that I jump off, but from the bottom floor to the top of the cage and me standing on top of it and then flying off of it, I would say between 25 and 30 feet high. Right now, I'm still wrestling. I travel all around the world, and, I'm wrestling mostly right now, mostly independents, and I wrestle about 2 or 3 times a weekend, do autograph session at times, during the weekdays. I've been very successful with taking good care of myself, and other than that, being hurt sincerely, no, I've been very lucky about that. And I do a lot of training every day, and to keep yourself in good physical condition, in other words, to be in our profession. This was Roddy Piper's pit, and I came out to the pit, and he was asking me all kind of questions like, are you the Superfly Jimmy Snuka? And I go, yes. And he says, are you a very popular wrestler? I go, yes. And he says, well, now you're standing here with me in my pit and everything else. And he turns around and he says to me, he says, Superfly Jimmy Snuka, he says, I got some presents here for you. I said, okay. So what he did is that he had a bag right in front of him. And what he's been doing is that first he would pull out a banana, which I'm sure that, I'm sure that he's making fun of me since that I'm from the islands and I'm from the jungle and everything else. So now he's probably making fun of me, which is okay, no problem. He pulls out a banana, he pulls out a pineapple, and then he pulls out a coconut. Not one coconut, but, 1, 2, or 3 of them. And then the last coconut he pulled out, he says, I want you to hold on to this microphone. So I grabbed the microphone and I said, are you making fun of me? And he says, making fun of you. So he kind of like turned his head around. He had this one coconut in his hand. He took that coconut and he smashed it over my head. And I went down. A coconut is a coconut. But I got your back, Piper, and he'll never stop. As long as I see you on the road, it'll happen again. I superflied him and demolished him for good. You remember that one knee of yours, right, brother? Don't forget it. The superfly Jimmy Snuka. Love you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Who would have ever thought, in my wildest dreams, I would have never thought that I would grow up to headline Madison Square Garden. I headlined Madison Square Garden 211 times and had 187 sellouts. And then other famous arenas like the Boston Garden. I headlined that arena more than anybody else, between 150 and 175 times. And other arenas around the country and the overseas, highlighting in Japan and South America. And I wrestled the South American champion, and again, we had 35,000 screaming fans. In 1961, picking up Ace-Tex Calhoun. Nobody had ever come close to picking up this guy who weighed 625 pounds. That was such a tremendous, tremendous thrill for me, because I had done something that no man in history of wrestling had ever been able to do. And then, of course, was having the opportunity to wrestle Buddy Rogers.
1963, Sammartino attacking from the opening.
Bell rang, I came charging Buddy, and I picked him up and I threw him on my shoulders, and I said, Buddy, this is it, give it up. And he gave it up. I thought that the roof in Madison Square Garden was going to pop up. It meant that I reached the top. I was the new champ. I was the #1 guy. How did I break my neck when I wrestled Stan Hansen? He was a very young guy, big guy, strong guy. Anyway, I'm wrestling him in the garden. He went to body slam me. And when he scooped me up in the air, we were both very sweaty. The position he had me, he just drove me head first. And I went straight down on my head. And that's how I broke my neck. You know, a lot of people think about wrestling and they don't get hurt. They're prearranged, all that kind of stuff. People have no idea how difficult it was in those days and how tough. Those rings, they were like concrete. You know, I've had a broken neck, collarbone broken, most of my ribs, and I broke my right arm. I've broken my fingers, cartilages and ligament damage in the knees. My nose has been busted 11 times. I had my jaw cracked. But I got to tell you, the pain that you have when you get a cauliflower ear is indescribable. Believe me, you don't know what pain is until you get that. Worst things I'd have to say that happened. I'm wrestling Chick Garibaldi in Sunnyside Gardens. Scooped Chick up and gave him this big body slam. I noticed that his body wasn't responding. He lay there limp. But that's not what concerned me. What bothered me was his eyes. I saw his eyes kind of roll back and a weird sound came out of his mouth. By now the ambulance came, and by the time they came, he was gone. He had died. It was just a regular wrestling move and so forth, but the facts are that Chick Garibaldi did die, and it stayed with me for the longest time. I have to tell you about one of my opponents that was very special, and that's Ivan Koloff. Now, people hated this guy, but as a wrestler, I had great respect for him. #1, he was an impressive guy in the ring. #2, he had great quickness, great agility. And so what that made for was a great, great match. And when he'd shoot a tackle, you felt like you just got hit by a Sherman tank. In his day, he was as tough as they came. I wrestled him in Madison Square Garden. He caught me coming off the ropes with a knee. Then he went up to the top rope and he came down with a knee drop. And then he got on top and he counted 1, 2, 3. And I did not expect what happened. It was like you could heard a pin drop.
The people went from like cheering Bruno to the 1, 2, 3, and everybody going so quiet that you could hear a pin drop.
People were literally crying, and I had people say to me, Bruno, we still love you. You're still the best.
Bruno was so loved that after that, the women and people started crying that Bruno had lost the title when they realized finally
that it wasn't one of these things that they're going to give it back to Bruno.
Another guy I can tell you about that I had enormous respect was Killer Kowalski. If you went in the ring with Kowalski, you better be in the best shape you've been in, because if you didn't, boy, you're going to pay a price. But this guy was a machine. I don't care if it was the first 5 minutes or 60 minutes. To me, that was a great challenge. So every time I wrestled Kowalski, I wanted to see if I'd be that guy who was going to wear him down. And I felt good afterwards because I thought that was Killer Kowalski, who everybody fears of going in there and staying a long period of time because he's so aggressive, non-stop machine. If there were any doubt that I was as good a conditioned a wrestler as there could possibly be. So when I look back, I almost sometimes am afraid that I might wake up and find that it was all a dream, because how could one guy have so many wonderful highlights go in his life, in his career?
I was working out at a gym in Memphis, right across the river from where I live. I had run across some guys like Hillbilly Jim, Randy Savage, Lanny Poffo. At our time there in Memphis, the real popular guys were the fabulous ones, guys like that. And we were working in there, from day to day. They saw me a lot, and the guy came over to me and approached me. The guy was Randy Savage. He said, "Man, have you ever thought about getting into the wrestling business?" And I thought, no, I have not really ever thought about it. Knew it was real hard. It was back then. It was a lot harder, lot less talked about too, and it was harder to get people to talk to you about it. So I just never really considered it. And I said, no. He goes, well, I got someone I can introduce you to get you started. So he introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Tojo Yamamoto, which is a really big Japanese star there in the U.S. The championship wrestling organization there in Memphis at the time, and he had a school in Nashville. So what I did is I got up at 3 o'clock in the mornings on Sunday. I drove to Nashville, got tortured about 7 hours from this little fat Japanese guy. He beat me with a stick all day long. Did that for about a year, and then got into my first territory, which was down in Continental with the promoters down there, the Fullers, and started off there and really had a lot of fun. To me, it was like traveling around from town to town in a circus-like atmosphere with your brothers, your family. There was sometimes a lot of animosity towards each other, but when it really came down to it, all we had was each other, and it was a really family bond. Of course, you go through the normal struggles like being away from home, being homesick, having to find a new place to live, and trying to save money to pay your bills there, and then send back to pay bills at home. Had a little boy who was only 5 years old. You're missing everything with your family life. But you know what? I don't remember or regret any of that because it was so much fun starting in the business. My gimmick was it started as one character, Sid Vicious. In that character, there was a character in there like John Wayne, the stand-up-in-your-face type of guy that never backed down, in-your-face fighting all the time. And then as time went on, I started experimenting with my interviews and things like that. Then I put, some like Hannibal Lecter into the deal when, I do the laughing or sort of go off in those interviews when I started going off a little bit like I wasn't there anymore, thinking of different things. My style was, to create fear in the people. Like when I would, what I do is like something devastating, a move like take the guy by his throat, hold him for a few seconds, let the people see the intensity, while I'm holding, and his eyes are meeting my eyes, and then lift him up and then drop him down real hard, all right? And then, then I would stand back behind him and let him start moving on his own, and then I'd look at the people, look back and go, okay, now it's time to get him again. And as I do that, weight deal, then that's when the people are like, oh, God, no, get away, but then get him. The belt that I can remember meaning the most to me was when I won the World Wrestling Federation Championship for the first time, and it was at, of all places, the Madison Square Garden. And our business that's one of the dreams, first of all, is just get to the Gardens. If you get there, you've achieved almost everything you can achieve in the business, and then to win the title there, that says it all. Major injuries, We could be here for about 2 hours talking about this, but I'll just run across a few that was pretty serious. One of the serious ones I think for sure you can put on that list is when I broke my neck and they had to take a bone chip out of my hip and replace one of my vertebrae. That was a pretty hard deal. Took a long time to get through. But I'm going to have to say that the hardest, the worst injuries I've had up to date is when I broke my leg, the double compound fracture of the tibia and fibula above my ankle. For sure that's been the hardest one because it really took one of my limbs away, where the lower limb too, one of your legs, where I had to support all my weight on my right leg, being on a walker for the first time. You know, really you get a taste of what it's like when you see people in wheelchairs and you know, things like that. Once or twice a week, I try to get to the track and now start doing some physical walking up and down bleachers to get my left leg prepared to get caught up with my right leg where I can do the things it takes to wrestle. So that's what I'm doing right now. My opponent tonight would be easily pointed out in the back. He would be the man sitting there with a stared look in his face of knowing it'd be his last walkout, for he knows that this night he meets the man who is invincible and goes by the name Sid Vicious. For you, my friend, time has run out, though as if the last grain of sand has fell through the hourglass, and it is time for you to meet your maker. Somehow or another, to be real successful in this business, you really have to have a desire. I'm never going to be what's considered the greatest technician, but what I've always said is I want to be one of the greatest workers, and that means being able to have the fans out there and making them enjoy what they're seeing and not go home disappointed. That was one of my desires I set out right in the beginning. And certainly people like the Hart family did the same thing. I worked with all of them, Owen and Brett. You know, they both had great desires for this business, you know. And when you have a great desire, more times than not, you'll be successful. You know, if you have a desire for this business, you'll go to bed early, you'll get up early, and you'll do the things it takes to be great. I've had a few friends that wanted to get in the business and still struggling. It's like anything else that you want to try to do in life. And a lot of people might say I'm wrong about this, but to me, it's a lot harder to achieve a physical, say, aspiration than it is a mental aspiration. Wrestling would have to come first, and every aspect that makes you a good wrestler would have to be there, and that's, you know, given everything you got. You have to, you know, diet, you know, you have to work out. What I did, for instance, when I first said, okay, I'm going to be a professional wrestler, and I just, in the beginning stages, saw how hard it was going to be, so I said, okay, well, I'm not going to go out and party, or I'm not going to go out and hang out in the social life. I'm going to be the first one in bed, and I said this before on an earlier question. I'm going to be the first one up, and I'm going to be back from the gym from working out while everybody's still getting up. I'm going to have that kind of jump on everybody all the time. If you push yourself harder than everybody else, and that's the way I feel like I've been successful, is that I've pushed myself so hard and worked so hard, I've forced people to have to do business with me. In a sense, one, it's a good thing to want to do business with someone like me, because you know I'm going to be on time. You know I'm doing all the things it takes to be successful in this business, to keep on top of something, because this business grows every day. It changes. You would have to just have only wrestling on your mind, and that be it from the day you start to the day you end. I'd like to be remembered when you say the name Sid Vicious, that you automatically think of one of the greatest of all time. And also to be remembered as one that was enjoyable to watch, knowing that I gave everything I had to give to this business, and I literally mean that. I have given up everything I've had in this business. I've given up two lives of two of my children, not seen a birthday, a football game, a baseball game, never been to a birth of my children. I've gave up everything for this business. I've broke almost every bone. I've had major surgeries. I gave everything I had to this business while I was in the business. If people remember me for that, I would be happy.
Hawk and I, pretty much as kids, were always nicknames were Animal and Hawk. We've known each other since we were 8 years old, and we decided to get into the sport of professional wrestling. We wanted to do something that was kind of a motto of one of our favorite movies was The Road Warrior. That was one of our favorite movies, and we said, you know, everybody's always in typical wrestling tights and this and that in wrestling. I said, what can we do to change our gimmick? And Hawk says, hey, I got it. Animal, why don't you have a regular mohawk and I'll have a double mohawk, so it looks like we plug into each other, you know. So that's how the haircuts came about. Our style is 110% nonstop. Go at 'em. We come at you hard. We hit you hard. We want you to hit us hard back. My favorite move, and I was known to do it throughout time, was press slam. Before top rope broke one time, and it landed on my shoulder, and I dislocated it in the middle of a match. I had my manager yank it out and put it back in place. But I press slam. I was known to press slam all the big guys. I press slam Killer Khan, who was 330 pounds, over my head for 3 repetitions. I did Terry Gordy, who was 300 pounds. I was the guy that was known. I pressed Hulk Hogan in Japan when Hulk was 325. I was the only guy ever to press Hulk Hogan. We were the only guys ever to press Crusher and Bruiser, who were in the wrestling business phenoms, never went off their feet for 15, 20 years, and we press slammed both of them at the end of their career. I think wrestling fans, when I talk to a lot of wrestling fans around the country, as far as going as a most favorable match or most memorable match they have of us, usually the War Games scenarios come about, which are 2 rings inside of a giant cage, and you have to, and one of our my patented moves and my partner's was to dive across both rings and give a guy a flying shoulder tackle. The worst injury that I had in this wrestling business was I had orbital rim surgery. A guy landed on my head in the ring, a guy named the Warlord, big guy. He's from Minnesota, too. He landed on my head in such a way that my eye had popped out and had popped back in. But when I went in too far, my orbit was totally shattered. It went in too deep. So they had to pull it back out to its original spot, and they operated through my mouth and through my natural crease on my eye, so there was no scarring. But it was the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life. The Japan ones were pretty special to win on a belt in another country. I think winning our first world championship was pretty hot itself. I mean, that was pretty special. You know, here you are in a business that you look, and I watched at the time, and I watched Hulk Hogan, and I watched, Superfly Jimmy Snuka, and I watched all these guys flying, and I said, man, here I go in my first tournament, and Hawk and I win the belts. So we right away went from zeros to all of a sudden now we're the top tag team in the business, and we have been for the last how many years? 18 years. Everybody's trying to emulate us. There's been many of imitators, no duplicators. If you want to get in wrestling business, I advise you to be in tip-top shape. I advise you to be in the best shape of your life. I advise you to shut your mouth and listen. Become a student of this business right away, because that's the only way you're going to succeed. Listen to the guys that have got experience and be very respectful. Don't think just because you worked out and you were a UFC champion or you were a national karate champion that you come in and deserve to be a wrestling champion, because there's a lot of guys in the wrestling. There's a lot of tough guys in this business. There's a lot of great guys in this business. But it's very much a pecking order, very much a respect thing. If you go in the wrestling business and think you know it all right away, you're going to get shot down right away. You're never going to get a break. So respect and attitude is number one. You got to be patient, too, because it's not going to come the next day you get in. Just don't think because you work out and you go to a wrestling camp that you deserve to be the world champ the next day. I mean, timing, charisma, everything, being able to stand there and just like Hawk and I were able to do and just look at the people like this and get a reaction out of them. Or like Hogan when he waves his hand and does the thing to the ear and get people to cheer, doesn't come to everybody. Or Rock raising his eyebrow, that doesn't come to everybody. That comes to few and far between. That's why only a few guys make it to the legend status in professional wrestling. When our career is at its end, or when the fat lady sings, as everybody else says, it's all over when the fat lady sings, I hope that we will be remembered as the greatest tag team of all time. Let me tell you something right now. I'm the Animal, my partner, the Hawk. We're not some Johnny-come-lately in the sport of professional wrestling. If you think you're going to get in the ring on your first wrestling match and try to make a name for yourself and come try to beat us, you got another thing to think about, pal.
We are the Road Warriors. We are the Legion of Doom. We've been the best tag team in the history of professional wrestling, and we're not handing that up to anybody.
That's what I say to my opponent.
Animals being my partner for 20 years, nobody's accomplished that in the history of wrestling before. 20 years is a long time to be together. We're still young men. We're still in great shape. You know, you can just take a look. You know we're in shape. And Animal's a bigger guy than I am. Well, Ole Anderson, who gave Animal his first break as the original Road Warrior and then brought me in, saw the movie Road Warrior, I should say, with Mel Gibson, and we just added an S to it. Therefore, we were very smart right away. We patented that name. And, he came up with the name Hawk and Animal. I wanted Guido. It turned out to be Hawk was better. And we came up with the haircuts. That was my ideas. Where Animal have hair, I shouldn't, and where I do have hair, he should. And so we could plug our heads in like a unit. And the paint was his idea because it was off the movie. And things just clicked for us right after that. I think that my early struggles came with all the demand of the road, 250 days a year, 400 flights, and then coming home and trying to fit in normally. And I don't think it was possible for somebody, and what was happening to me so fast, you know, that became unstable. As far as breaking in, you know, Eddie Sharkey broke in, Jesse Ventura and Bob Backlund broke us in, but he broke us in on a boxing ring, which is about as hard as the wood floor that we're on right now. So, you know, it wasn't much of a show. I mean, he taught me nothing about a lot of things that I needed to know. He taught me how to take a bump. That's what he taught me how to do. We used to beat the crap out of each other. It was me and Animal, Barry Darso, who was one of the Demolition, and Rick Rude in the first school. And 4 tough guys that are pounding on the crap out of each other all the time. Paul is very responsible for getting us to where we were head-wise. He was our guardian angel. When we broke in, we were green as green could be. You know, he was real smart. He turned the tables right around on them promoters. He was great. Real manager. The 4 horsemen were really, really responsible for a lot of our success. That'd be Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, Ric Flair, and then several others, Lex Luger at one time. And there were others that were in there at the time, Ole Anderson even. Along with Rick Rude, rest his soul, and Manny Fernandez. They did well with us. Midnight Express did great with us. We were lucky we had a lot of talented people to work with right off the bat. You know, Ole Anderson told us, you guys don't know how to wrestle, guys, so just beat them up. Because, you know, if they don't want to come back next week, we'll have somebody else. So, you know, we didn't really know what we did. We tried not to hurt them as much as we did, but I'm sure there were some guys that got hurt. But we really didn't mean to do that. We just didn't know what we were doing. Power, power, power. All we did was power moves. And that's what we still do. We still do the press slams, still do the power slams, still do the flying tackles, the one-handed fist drop, the doomsday device off the top. It's all hardcore. We don't do anything that's light and easy. Even our clotheslines are pretty good. Pretty good if you're me or Animal. But I mean, you know, we've worked hard. We work hard. I had my left shoulder separated twice. I had my cells on my left side. My left leg was broken twice. Once the fibula, which is nothing, then the bigger bone, that was something. And I never did another back drop since, and you'll never see me do another back drop. And that's about it for me. I've broken some ribs a few times. That's about it. I think the thing that means the most is nobody can duplicate what we've done because we won the WWF twice. We won the NWA twice, the WCW twice, the AWF once, the New Japan twice, All Japan twice, NWA twice, WCW, did I already say that? I mean, we've just been that lucky that people ran the ball, let us run with the ball. We just did a pay-per-view that was June 22nd at in Atlantic City Outdoors minor league baseball stadium. We're doing cartoons, voiceover work. I'm interested in radio. There's all sorts of things, all sorts of irons in the fire.
Speaking of what we'll do to our opponents, me and Animal are quite fond of the medulla oblongata, which is the brainstem, which controls all your bodily functions, which means after we rip it out, you're going to be wearing the pins for the rest of your life.
As I was coming out of high school and through college and that whole transition, I thought it was a big joke. I was not a wrestling fan. I never watched wrestling. Then I got my degree. I blew my knee. I was planning on being a football player, making big money. Since I lost my knee, I had to teach. I settled down with 2 children, a third one on the way, for $4,300 a year. But my friend was a big-time wrestling fan, and he talked me into calling Bert Ruby, who was the big-time wrestling promoter in Detroit at the time. I called Bert, and I, at 2:30 in the morning, told him I wanted to be a wrestler. They were looking for somebody, so he invited me over the next day, and he explained the wrestling business to me, what it was. We decided that I should wear a mask because I was a teacher and a coach, and that was my drive and what I wanted to do. We put a name on it. I put a mask on. I wore a cap and gown, and we called me the student because I was learning the wrestling business. The Animal. We never come up with the idea of calling me an animal. The crowd, the fans, because of Harry Body and the Annex, started calling me an animal. So one day I'm doing a very articulate interview, and Vince Jr. says, "You're making too much sense for an animal," which kind of zinged me a little bit. So I'll show him. This is all TV, and it's taped. We can change it. So he sticks the mic in front of me, he says, and he asked me a question. I went, and it took me 5 minutes to answer his question. And I was really busting on him. This was kind of a rib. I got all done. I thought, well, he said, "That's it. That's what I want." I went, "Oh, God." I was known for 2 things. And this is crazy. It wasn't about wrestling. I was known because I had a green tongue. The truth of the matter is I'd had a few drinks before a TV show, and I put some Chlorets in my mouth. Didn't have a clue that my tongue was green. Went out, did the TV show so the promoters wouldn't smell any booze on me. And when I come back, the switchboard lit up. "Why is his tongue green?" Because this is back when TV was live. The following Friday, I went to the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh. It had these big green tongues hanging down all over the place. And I thought, God, this is cool. So about every 2 or 3 months, I would eat some Chlorets for a laugh. I'm a little slow. But then finally, I figured out every time I did that, I got this great reaction. So I started taking Chlorets before every match and making my tongue green. And the results of that was really the best smelling breath in the wrestling industry. I had great breath. Wasn't much of a performer, maybe, but I did smell good. The turnbuckles became a fetish of mine, and it all started one day in Pittsburgh at a small studio TV shoot. This is old school now we're talking about. We used to get about 200 people in a studio, and we had plywood around the outside with faces painted on it, 200 people sitting in front, and we'd give away things like glasses sometimes, and this particular time they give away pillows, thank God. And the pillows were like these little couch pillows, and a lady got mad at me and threw one of her pillows at me. Well, I got the pillow, and not as stupid as I look, I knew that there was 200 more pillows out there, so if I threw the pillow back at her, that I'd have 200 pillows coming at me. If I sat on it, it was going to be a very boring match, so what are you going to do with a pillow? I took it, I bit it, ripped it apart, and this stuff just exploded out of it because this pillow was packed real tight. It's like one of those couch pillows, satin couch pillows. It was packed real tight, so the stuff blew up in the air. I took it, started throwing it, it stuck in my hair. I looked like the abominable snowman. The place went nuts. And Tony Puglisi, Bruno Sammartino's cousin, said, "You know, maybe you could eat a turnbuckle." And we all just laughed at it. About 2 weeks later, I was wrestling with Chief Jay Strongbow, and he was doing all of his antics. I was doing all of mine. The people were sitting on their hands. It was just not working. The match really wasn't getting it done. So I looked at the turnbuckle. I thought, I wonder. I went over, took a bite, ripped it open, boom, rubbed it in his face. The place went nuts, and it didn't take me 3 or 4 months to figure out that wasn't a bad thing to do. I started doing that every night. But my greatest advocate was my wife, because I had to learn all these maneuvers. And I put wrist locks on her and teach her how to put a hammer lock on me, and we reversed back and forth until I learned how to use all these crazy wrestling holds. And I got real good at using wrestling holds with my wife in the kitchen while she was trying to wash dishes. "Get out of here," she'd tell me. But then I'd get in the ring with a guy like Bruno Sammartino, and all those holds went out the window. I would pound on Bruno. I was a brawler. I wasn't a wrestler. I'd kick his tail, and then all of a sudden he would start this stuff, and the Italians would start coming up, and all of a sudden it was a dangerous place to be. And I feel pretty lucky, and I owe it all back to wrestling and things like Acclaim. They just keep popping up for me. I spend my time trying to help people. So many people in the world today are hurting and suffering in different ways, health-wise, financially. People get up every morning and go to a job that they hate. They work with people that they don't like. They come home at night and drink a beer. They don't have time to hug their kids. I'm helping people get out of that syndrome, and I love it. I mean, I've got so much that I want to give back, and so many different ways that I can do it. And I owe so much because life and God has been so good to me. So that's where I'm at.
You know what? Tonight, on Acclaim, anyone that wants to try me, come on down, Daddy, because it's the end of the line. You push the buttons, and I win. Bye-bye!
I wrestled for actually about 35 years. I was very fortunate that I got a break in wrestling early on, and it just kept going on and on. I taught school, and I wrestled in the summertime, so my body didn't take the beating that a lot of people did, a lot of people's bodies did, so I was able to really stretch it to the farthest limits, probably. First year I went to New York, can you imagine my traveling compadres? There's Captain Lou Albano and Tony Altimore, two of the biggest characters in the business, and I say this with all the due love that you could give them. They're going to break this young kid, and I was as green as grass. They're going to break him in the right way. So every time, they picked me up every day at the hotel, drove me to the arena, stopped to eat. If we spent the night at a hotel, they took me to the hotel, dropped me off, whatever. They took care of me. And they liked me so much that every night, every day, every time we stopped to eat, they would grab the tab, say, no, this is on us. This is on us. This is on. And I finally was kind of getting irritated with it. You know, I'm not a cheap guy. I'll pay my own way. This is your first year in here. You're our guest, da-da-da. This went on the whole summer, 2.5 months. But they were nice to me. They'd let me buy the gas every night. Gas costs more than food, actually. At the end of the summer, I'm ready to go home. It's the last show. They come in with a big laugh. All the boys are standing around. They're all kind of looking at me like I'm a jerk. And they present me with this brown bag. This brown bag had every tab that I had walked out on and they hadn't paid for. I had stolen my food, my groceries from every store, every restaurant on the East Coast. And I ended up looking like the big ha-ha at the end of the tour. Those are the kind of ribs that are fun. If I'd have got caught someday, I guess I'd go back and pay for all of them, but I didn't even know where to start. But we walked out on a lot of tabs due to that rib. Those are the kinds of things that they pulled that are really kind of harmless to me, maybe a little tough on some of the restaurants. The funniest thing that ever happened to me in the ring, would you like to hear that one? This is going to be quick. They want me to wrestle a bear on live television. D-clawed, he's got a mud. I said, no, I'm not doing that. Oh, don't be afraid. I said, I'm not afraid of the bear. I know he's trained. I just don't think it's good for our business, because I always held the wrestling business in kind of high esteem, for a human to go wrestle a bear. But you're an animal. We want an animal and a bear. This is in Pittsburgh again. No, I'm not going to do it. Well, they advertised it. TV ratings were coming up, and they plugged it all over the place. The animal wrestles the bear. George Animal Steele's wrestling. So I get there that particular day. I drive up, and I see it, and I forgot all about it. I see the cage outside the truck. Victor the Bear's there. I go, oh, boy. Told him I wasn't going to do it. I'm stubborn. So I go in and say, okay, George, you're going to... I'm not doing it. Told you I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. So they pleaded, and they got in their wallet, and they pleaded the right way. And they said to me, just go out and do your character with it, and then leave, and the trainer will get in and wrestle the bear. I said, okay, I'll do that. So I go out and do all my wild stuff. The bear gets all excited. It did its thing in the ring. No other way to say it, the bear shit in the ring. Now the bear's running through this stuff, and I'm looking at Bill Cardell, who's the announcer, and I said, Bill, guess what? He said, what? I said, I thought the TV was off. I had no idea that it was still running. I scared the shit out of the bear. Well, now the lights go out. I mean, it's boom. And this is in the middle of the show of ratings week. Bottom line is, and it was live. We lost that TV show. The bottom line is, I was never asked to wrestle the bear again. Probably the wildest, craziest person I ever worked with. And you got to understand, in wrestling, you can't have two wild guys. You got to have a straight guy. It's like a cartoon, a comedian. He's got to have a straight guy and a funny guy. In wrestling, you got to have that. And I provided the wild stuff, but the guy that could feed that to me the best, probably, and I hate to say this because there's a lot of things that made working with him very tough, was Randy Macho Man Savage. This guy took advantage of everything. I don't know if it's because he was lazy or what. He was the cheapest guy in the world. I mean, he squeezed a dime. I mean, my gosh. But when it came to doing the ring thing, he could get the most out of the least. And I found it a lot of fun working with him. At times it was very aggravating because in reality, in real life, Elizabeth was his wife, and he was very, very jealous. He didn't want, one time I found out that during the match I was going to be laying on the ground, I was going to reach out very dramatically and grab Elizabeth by the ankle. He come in, and so I'm telling him what I'm going to do, and he went off. Oh, you can't, that's my wife. You're going to grab her by the ankle. He went nuts. It's just a show. I mean, my daughter's older than she is. But JYD, God bless him, could always stir that pot and make it hotter. He said, Randy, you're missing the whole boat. He says, you got one question you should ask. And I said, what's that, man? He says, is George going to be laying on his belly looking at the concrete? Or is he going to be laying on his back looking up her dress? That's what you better find out. God, he went off. I mean, it was like a fire hall needed to be called in. And he would attack security guards because if somebody reached out and touched Elizabeth, he wanted to kill everybody. It was crazy, but boy, did he take advantage of it. Did I take advantage of it? He was so jealous that before I'd go to the ring, I'd tell him, Randy, relax, because he was hyper. Relax, we're going to have fun. And I got to tell you, I got a daughter that's a lot older than Elizabeth, and this is just a show. Relax. Just as I would leave, because I was a bad guy. At that point, I was a good guy. And he was on his way to the ring, is the way this would be. Just as he was leaving for the ring, I'd say, but remember, I got a heck of a record with these young chicks around here. He was like this here, and he was on the spotlight. So I knew how to get out of him what I wanted.
Well, the gimmick that I used, the gimmick that I was most remembered for, was the $1 Million Man. And in reality, I had a lot of input, but the gimmick was actually the idea. It was the brainchild of Vince McMahon. I came along about '87, and I got the call from Vince, and he said, Ted, I've got an idea. It's a gimmick that's never been done, which is very unusual because everything's been done in wrestling and overdone. And he says, I think, you're the guy that can pull this off. You're college educated, you're very articulate, you carry yourself well, and you're a good heel, and that's what we need. I went to the World Wrestling Federation, and Vince basically laid out the basic story of what this character was, and the $1 Million Man was like the Ebenezer Scrooge of wrestling. I was in a movie briefly, one of Sylvester Stallone's movies. He did, right after Rocky, he did a movie called Paradise Alley, and I flashed across the string of that. It was about wrestling. There were many wrestlers in that movie. But one of the things that happened on the set was there were a lot of Hollywood extras that were making wisecracks about pro wrestling. Sylvester Stallone stopped everything one day, and he says, I don't want to hear another word about wrestling or pro wrestlers. He says, we're doing something here in 3 days that would take us 3 to 6 weeks to do with Hollywood stuntmen. He said, these guys are the greatest improv actors in the world. And then I just kind of bowed up, made me feel good. The not so glamorous life of wrestling is, life on the road. I wrote a book about it. Cheap hotels, 4 guys traveling in a car, not making enough money to eat at a decent restaurant, bologna blowouts. You go to the 7-Eleven, a loaf of bread and a couple of packs of lunch meat, and slap that stuff together, and down the road you go. And you check into a cheap hotel. One guy pays for the room, and you what we call heal the room, where you get 3 guys, in a room, 4 guys in a room, 2 double beds. Well, now you take the box spring and the mattress, you separate them. You got 2 box springs, 2 mattresses, and then you flip a coin to see who gets the box spring and who sleeps on the mattress. And I mean, we did that all the time. From a fan's point of view, in terms of highlight matches for the $1 Million Man, well, they would probably have to say, when I came onto the scene, WrestleMania 4, wrestling Macho Man Randy Savage, Hulk comes in the ring, hits me in the back with a chair, and the Savage becomes the champion. When Mike Rotundo and I, who was wrestled as IRS, what a combination, right? The $1 Million Man and the IRS, Money Incorporated. When we wrestled as tag team champions, we opened the show at Wembley Stadium in front of 80,000 people against the Road Warriors. Moves that I love to do. I love to do a thing called the Power Slam, where I'd catch a guy coming off the ropes, and I'd go right over the top with him to the mat.
A thing that I think that I maybe trademarked and a lot of guys have copied. I just called it a diving punch, you know, or I'd lay a guy out there and I would throw my feet up almost like a drop kick and get parallel, and I would come down at an angle like this, and what it did is it ended up tearing up my left shoulder is what it ended up doing, because I was coming down with all the weight on my left side, and it looked like I was driving my fist right through the guy's head, and of course it was never going any further than that. There was always this much distance, and it would touch him, but that's all it would do. It's as physical as pro football. It's controlled, if you will, violence. People always ask me, what about those steel folded metal chairs? Those are real. You got to know how to swing that chair. And usually it's across the back with the flat of the chair, but you've seen guys get it right on top of the head and fold that chair over their head. Well, it's got to be the seat of that chair. You better have a good strong head and a good strong neck, or you could get seriously hurt. You know, you don't hit somebody in the face. You always hit them on the crown of the head and the back of the head, the hardest part of the head. Those are things you learn. But you're still taking a look. I always tease. I go, well, you know, I've been hit with a dozen chairs and it never really affected me. You know, right.
Everybody's got a price for the $1 million man. There's nothing. There's nobody that I can't buy. There's three things you never do. You don't tug on Superman's cape. You don't spit in the wind. And you don't write checks that you can't back up. And when you climb in the ring with the $1 million man, I stand real tall when I'm standing on my wallet. And when you climb in the ring with me, you just can't back that up. So remember, you will be bought.
Trillionaire Ted was, well, basically they couldn't call me the $1 Million Man because it was copyrighted by the World Wrestling Federation. They could call me Ted DiBiase because that's my name. So actually it was Hulk Hogan who just, you know, one night in the limo when we were doing that, he just said, hey, Trillionaire Ted, and it stuck. So obviously I'd gone from the millionaire to the trillionaire, and, you know, it's just a play on words. Physical injuries, many. I've got a couple of false teeth. I have my trademark wrestling cauliflower ear. I have had both of my knees operated on. I have no cartilage in my right knee. I am 48 years old, and I'm a candidate at some point for knee replacement. I hope for just one. This is the really bad one. But when I was 35 years old, I had my last knee surgery, and I was told at 35 I had the knees of a 65-year-old man because of constant pounding. And I wore knee pads every night. My hips are beginning to bother me, you know, arthritis. 20 years of back drops, body slams, drop kicks. I've had 2 discs removed from my neck. That was what that's when I ended my career. 2 herniated discs, and I had the surgery, had those discs removed, and I'm probably going to have to go back and have it done again. There's no hospitalization. There's no protection for wrestlers. There's no union in wrestling. You are at the mercy of that promoter. That is something I think should change in the wrestling business. Something needs to be done to take care of these guys. You know, set them up on, lead them to financial investors and advisors. Put them on a pension plan, hospitalization plan, because they're making you a living. Vince, I'm talking to you. Those guys are making you a living. You know, you become a billionaire. Take care of your people. The one thing that's often been said about me is I was the one guy who created more world champions, or helped create more world champions, and never actually had the belt, but was promised the belt countless times. I was supposed to be the NWA champion, and it never happened. I went to the WWF, and originally the plans were for me to win the WWF title at WrestleMania 4, and again, it didn't happen, and a lot of that is politics. But I held many belts. I held the North American belt in the Mid-South for a number of times. WWF World Tag Team Champions with Mike Rotundo. International heavyweight title, again, over in Japan. Tag Team Champions with Stan Hansen in Japan. That was a big deal. But again, all those belts don't really mean anything. They, in terms of actual championships, they're not real awards. What they do say is that you were the man. You were one of the key players. In terms of motion pictures, you're one of the stars. The ability to be a great worker in wrestling is to make it look real, but you're working. And there are a lot of things done today that don't, it's like, that's what's missing today. It's so obviously phony today. I guess people don't care. But again, I guess I'm an old timer, and that old, you don't have guys today that can get in the ring and entertain you for 30 or 40 minutes. Not with a bunch of stuff from outside, not with chairs, but I mean get in the ring, get on the mat, and entertain you and have you leaping out of your seat wanting to either kill a guy or, overjoyed, make you laugh, make you cry, make you happy, all of those emotions. There's not guys in the business anymore that know how to do that with just wrestling.
I was out there, baby, and I'm telling it to you. I'm Captain Lou, and I'm talking to you, and you. I was in the service and came out. I had an injury existing prior to service, so they gave me an honorable discharge back in the early 50s. And while I was in service, they put a wrestling show on. And they had the fella from The Godfather, Luco Prazzi. That's the one they stabbed his hand and choked him. His name was Lenny Montana, a professional wrestler along with Arnold Skolin. I watched them, and I went back and I said, I know this is a show. I said, it's sports entertainment. They're the world's greatest athletes. I said, but how did you guys get into this? They said, well, kid, you got to learn how to fall and so forth. They took me to a gym down in New York and showed me how to fall. And I broke in 1951, 52, professional wrestling. Well, myself and Tony Altamori in the late 50s had the tag team belts, tag team championship, and we held them belts, and I had the Midwestern title for a while. I was never a great wrestler, but Tony Altamore kind of carried me. Well, the gimmick I used during my career, I was down in a Bowery one day, and the guy, hard on his luck, had a rubber band in his beard. I said, gee, that'd be great. I grew my beard, put a rubber band in, put an earring on, and then days it wasn't fashionable to have an earring, but years ago, I was the first guy with an earring on and went around, and it was Captain Lou. Bruno Sammartino, who saw me wrestle and said, you're not the greatest wrestler in the world. Become a manager. You're a good, excuse the language, good talker. I'll put it that way. I didn't want to use the other word. And he said, you should become a manager. He said, you're nonstop and all in the dressing room. All you do is keep talking. That's where I really made my mark and got to be known, Captain Lou Albano. The guy said, you're a captain of what? I said, I'm a captain of my own mind. I dubbed myself a captain and went on to manage, as I said, 18 tag team champions, 2 Intercontinental, and world single champion. I had people like Ivan Koloff, and I had Don Morocco, and I had the Valiant Brothers, and I had Tarzan Tyler and Luke Graham, Baron Cicluna, and I had them all. Managing guys, the Valiant Brothers, Afa and Sika, going against opponents like Tony Atlas and, wait a minute, and Rocky Johnson. Now, Rocky Johnson is the father of The Rock. Those were great matches. When you put Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas against the Wild Samoans, Afa, Sika, the Valiant Brothers, against Jimmy Snuka, the Superfly, who would go off the corner and come down 30, 40, well, I say 30, 40 feet, 15 feet into the ring, and boom, the guy, you think he would kill the guy. I mean, the guy, that was great. A great opponent and someone that's great to work with, a wrestler, has to be in shape, number one. He's got to be an aggressive personality. Some wrestlers can't speak, some can. If you can't, now you get people like Hulk Hogan, he can do a great interview. Okay, there's a lot of wrestlers are great talkers that as good as me, if not better. But there are some that can't, so then they have a manager with them. And some of them, they're good talkers themselves, but the manager helps and aids. If you're a manager, you got heels in wrestling, and you got baby faces. Baby faces are good guys. The heels are the bad guys. So by putting the heel manager with a guy, he automatically becomes a villain, and it draws money, and you go back and forth from there. It was more holds years ago, and it was a little more almost like amateur wrestling, more than it is today. Today I've got 14 grandkids, and I tell my Toms and maybe to watch it, they're going a little too far. I mean, they're little kids with they're putting the finger up in the air. You got 8, 9-year-old kids watching it. All I say is calm it down a little bit so that the kids can enjoy it. You got little 6, 7-year-olds watching it. Let's do it that way. Wrestling can be very physical and very dangerous. Some of the injuries I received, I've got 2 broken lumbar in my lower back. I broke my ribs 17 times. Take a look at my face and you can see it's not pretty. My nose has been broken. I got no cartridges in the nose. I've got several scars and host scars all over the place from cage matches that run you into the playground. It's a playground fence around a cage. And every time they run you in, I mean, it scratches your face, scratches your head. on your arms, your back. I broke my leg twice and my wrist. So I've had several injuries, and as I said, it's a sport. It's a great, great game, but it is dangerous. What I'm doing now is acting. I make appearances in wrestling on occasion. Come in the ring, sign some autographs, bring a fellow back and forth to the ring. Just that people still say, hey, Captain Lou, we remember you from years ago. And I got a film coming out called The Father and the Son. It's Eagle Film, Sal Mazzata. That'll be coming out, and it's won some kind of an award at the film festival as a good picture, and I play a hitman for the mob. And things like that in local commercials. National commercial I did, 1-800-YES credit. So it's enough to keep an old man of 70 years old busy. A man with a face like this that only a mother can love keeps me going. I'm out there and I'm happy. But I'd like to go out and say the guy was funny. The guy made people laugh. The guy made people happy. He brought happiness to people. So I'd like to go down and say, hey, this guy loved to talk. This guy never shut up. This guy sometimes can be a pain in the neck or a pain somewhere else. But beside that, he was a personality. He was someone you can enjoy and have a little fun with. If I were talking to an opponent tonight and I'm looking into the camera, I would say, hey, moron, you're talking to me, I'm talking to you. And I'm not doing Robert De Niro. Yeah, I'm talking to you. You're a moron, you're an imbecile, you got the brain of a dehydrated DB. If they put it in a pigeon or parakeet, it flies backwards. So remember, I'm Captain Lou, and I'm coming for you, and I'm Captain Lou, and I know that's true. All right? So get ready.
My name is Scott Bam Bam Bigelow. I am from Neptune, New Jersey, a.k.a. Asbury Park, or my adopted hometown. I've been wrestling 18 years. I'm going on 19. I might have missed a year here, so 20 to be safe. Being an All-American in wrestling and having I would say a really, really good, strong amateur background in sports, being a good athlete, basically. Being in the bars and working the Stone Pony and hanging out with Springsteen, that was all fun, but it got really tiring, and I wanted to do something with my ability and the gift that God gave me. I wound up going to a wrestling school, Larry Sharp's Munster Factory, and it was just rough, it was having no food, no money, living in the gym, training every day, just constantly wrestling, taking care of the school for Larry Sharp. It was a blast, breaking in. I broke in the hard way, you could say. I paid my dues. Back in the early days with WWF, we were working 60 days in a row, and on the weekends we would do 2 shows, so they were called double shots. So Saturday and Sunday you had double shots. So you would wrestle, and they would rush you to a plane. You fly in a Learjet to the next town, and they would shove you in a limousine, take you to the building, take you back to the airport, shove you in a plane, fly you to the next building, and so on and so on. It's life in the fast lane. I mean, for guys that weren't married, there was women out there begging, calling me, you and you, come on. And then for some of us, it was let's just eat and go to bed. I was one of them guys, but, it was just a demanding lifestyle. It was the road. In the beginning, Hulk Hogan was the one that I was his tag team partner, and just being around the business with him and traveling around the world and wrestling the main event in front of a sold-out crowd every night, and then just doing a boom. That guy right there, just really took me and said, okay, this is the business, this is how we do it. We don't joke around, this is serious. And by him showing me that, gave me that extra edge to where I went to work wanting to work and saying, oh, I got to wrestle this guy tonight. No, I went out there to try and steal a show every night. So the Hulkster was the one that guided me.
I was Bam Bam Bigelow. I was the beast from the East, the master of disaster, the man that put the word crunch in captain. But
I came out to the ring, and my outfit was all flames. My head's tattooed in a ball of fire. And that more or less just accented my personality of just being a ball of fire, all wound up, all burning out, all whatever. But yeah, I'm just a fireball. I was the first big man, being 425 pounds, being able to do cartwheels and moonsaws, and just being really agile and quick, doing things that you wouldn't expect from a big man. So anything that had to do with running and flipping and flying through the air, that's what I enjoyed.
I like to fly, man. I'm like a 747.
Most exciting for me was being ECW heavyweight champion, where ECW Extreme Championship Wrestling, when they were around, was just a new way of wrestling, or a new storyline, so to speak. And being a champ there was just, it was a tall order. I mean, you had to go out, you had to wrestle, you were the main event every night, and you had to produce.
The fans bring stuff so you can hit another guy in the head to the ring, buckets of crutches, sinks, and computers, just anything that you could beat somebody up with, they brought. And ECW made the business fun for me again.
But now I'm much lighter, much quicker, more stamina. I'm really looking forward, being 40 years old and just feeling great. The best big man in the business. That's what I want to be remembered as, a guy that came along, was doing cartwheels, moonsaults, drop kicks, and did things that they never ever seen another big man do before, and sat there and said, wow, that dude can move. And that's the best big man in the business. I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm 40 years old. And I hope you didn't count out Bam Bam Bigelow, because I'm coming back. I'm coming back bigger, stronger, faster. I am the beast from the East, and I'm going to live up to that. I'm going to be back. I'm going to have fun. I want all you people to have fun with me. You feel frisky? You feel like a frog? Well, you want to jump? Let me tell you something. I am Bam Bam Bigelow. I am the beast from the East. I am the master of disaster. And you want to play in my yard? We're going to figure out just how bad you really are. There's a lot of contact, as political, and as people say, oh, they choreograph it, you practice. We don't practice. We call it in the ring, but you do make contact, and accidents do happen, and you just can't take somebody and slam them down on the mat and expect it not to hurt. For us, it's different. I mean, we do it day in and day out. We're like a cat. If you take a cat and you flip him up in the air, he's going to land on his feet. Well, we land on our backs, and our backs are a way of cushioning the blow. Guys get hurt all the time, and guys still go out and perform. They still wrestle hurt, and they do their thing, as injured as you are, and it's tough. You have to be a robot or a machine in this business, because, if you can't do a town or make a shot, then they think about replacing you. The longer you're out, the more they're going to replace you. So, you really have to be careful. You're going to get hurt. I don't care who you are. Things are going to happen, and there's nothing you can do about it. I had a lot of friends in this business. One of the best times that I had in this business was being part of, in ECW, was being part of Triple Threat. Three of the major players in that company at the time, myself, Chris Candido, and Shane Douglas, we formed an alliance called Triple Threat, where the three of us just went around kicking everybody's ass. So that was fun. And then in WCW, we formed a triad. Was me, Chris Canyon, who's a great kid, and then Diamond Dallas Page is somebody that I known from Asbury Park when I was young and grew up with, and never expected him to be in the business. So, and Page went on to be a big-time hero. He's retired now, but those were great, man. The Triad and the Triple Threat. The best feud that I really had the most was probably with Tatanka, because the matches were it was WWF. The matches were exciting. They were full of energy. It was just where we would go out and virtually kill each other just to make the fans happy. Tatanka and I really went from town to town, city, state to state, just blowing everybody away like we were the toughest match to follow. I had a lot of fun. And Doink the Clown with the little midget Dink. Doink was a good friend of mine. In fact, is the godfather of my son. Wrestling with Doink was a lot of fun because it was something different. It was ha-ha instead of seriousness. So we went out there and played every night, and the fans loved it. We toured the world with that show, and we just had a great time. So I would say, Doink and Tatanka were because the matches were so good and they were so much fun. The only match that really comes to mind is me wrestling Andre the Giant in the main event, Madison Square Garden. where he actually tried to kill me. He stepped on my head a few times and, choked me a few times. So, Andre was, in our business, Andre was, a classic. He was a giant, and he really was a giant. And he was a big, mean, smelly giant. Bad News Allen was in the ring with Andre the Giant, and Andre gave him a big boot, and he went down, and Andre grabs the ropes, and he goes to sit down and to squash Bad News Allen. But you have to understand that Andre was drinking tequila and Clamato juice all day. I mean, Andre was a big drinker, so his stomach probably wasn't feeling too good. So when Andre went to sit down on Allen, he let loose. I mean, he had diarrhea, and it just went busting out of his ass. And he's sitting on Allen, and the doo-doo was all running down his neck, and the smell was profuse. I mean, we were laughing until we got wind of it, and then we started puking. But Andre sat on Allen and just went to the bathroom right in his pants. And he couldn't move because every time he moved, more came out. So he was kind of like stuck in suspended animation, and Alan's stuck underneath him, and he's screaming, "Get off me, get off me!" But, oh, God, we laughed, and we laughed, and we laughed. I laughed. That was 12 years ago, and I'm still laughing. But, yeah, Andre took a dump on Bad News Allen. It was hysterical.
Well, excuse me, brother, but the first thing Hacksaw Jim Duggan has to do is give a big ho! Kind of fires me up, gets the blood flowing through the heart, gets the air in the lungs, gets Hacksaw Duggan ready to roll. Now ask your questions, tough guy. Well, the gimmick I use, when I first started professional wrestling, there was a lot of fancy Dan guys out there with feathered boas and sequin robes. Nothing fancy Dan about Hacksaw Jim Duggan, just a 2x4 and the flag of the United States of America. Kind of a working man's hero type of deal. Of course, one thing about Hacksaw, I never worried about winning the match, long as I won the fight. But when I was wrestling, I was WCW television champion, the only undefeated television champion in history. I was king of the ring in WWF. I was North American heavyweight champion in UWF. But I tell you what, I don't worry about them fancy damn belts. The only thing that matters to Hacksaw Jim Duggan is I win the fight. Tough guy. Ho! I can't help it. Sometimes I just got a hole. But two of my biggest injuries in professional wrestling was once down at the Sam Houston Coliseum in Houston, Texas, when the one-man gang ran me into the ring post and a bolt went into my head. Cracked my skull. It was a debilitating injury and almost put me out of wrestling completely. But the injury that caused me the most problem and kept me out of wrestling longer than anything was the ruptured Achilles tendon. And that was about a 6-month injury. Oh, question about it. There's one match that stands out in my mind and stands out in the mind of all the fans of Hacksaw Jim Duggan. That was Andre the Giant. There's only one man in the history of professional wrestling that knocked out Andre the Giant, and that's Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Tough guy, and that's what the fans remember. One of my favorite stories on the road is with my good friend Jake the Snake Roberts. We were driving down the road in a big rented Lincoln one day, running late for our show as usual. We're doing about 80 miles an hour. And wherever Jake went, he carried Damien, a 110-pound python snake. He kept the snake in a big duffel bag, and we'd always throw it in the back seat of the car. Well, the snake would always push against the bag, trying to get out. And one day we got out of the bag, so I'm driving down the road. I look in the mirror. There's this big, huge snake head behind me. So I slam on the brakes. We slide off the road, pulling a little gas station. And there's two old-timers sitting there rocking in their chair. And we jump out of the car, open the back door, start wrestling with this 110-pound snake, stuff it back in the bag, throw it in the trunk, and drive off. So to this day, those guys got to be going, what in the world was that all about? Well, I tell a lot of folks, a lot of people come up to me and say, Hacksaw, of course, they're 6'3", 6'5", 300 pounds, 24 years old. I want to be a pro wrestler. But folks, you out there got to understand, there's 1,500 NFL football players. There's 1,000 NBA basketball players. There's 100 pro wrestlers on contract this year.
It's television. It's actually more competitive than sports. So what I tell kids when they say they want to be a pro wrestler, I say, hey, play golf. It's easier on the body, and it's more money. Ho! Boy! They try to put me out the pasture. They put old Hacksaw in a rocking chair on the front porch, and I sit there rocking away. But that's not Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So I work a few independent shows. I do some overseas shows, and I'm looking for a new company to start up in this country that will be a little more family-friendly, without all the obscene gestures and profanity. So folks, keep an eye open for the new Wrestling Federation coming out soon. Look into the camera and pretend that I'm taking on some punk kid in a wrestling match. It's my favorite deal. Because, you know, now, when they got these wrestling promoters that dress kids up and give them a wrestling name and say, hey, you're a pro wrestler. And they come out and they go, well, I'm going to go out to the ring, and I'm going to do the best job I can. I hope I win. Well, that's not Hacksaw Jim Duggan's way. The way I do it is I put my grade A hams on my hip. I stomp on down to the ring. I listen for the bell. And then I do what Hacksaw Jim Duggan does best. Beat people up. So I'm not some punk kid standing down in the convenience store with my hands in my pockets going, ooh, he's a big wrestling star. I'm 6'3", 275 pounds. And if one of you punk kids want to come down and take on Hacksaw Jim Duggan, I'm not a hard man to find. And so like the game show host says, come on down, tough guy.
I think my gimmick was being myself. My name is Bob Backlund. I weighed 230 pounds. I was 6 feet tall, and it didn't take a lot to come up with that. And I think it got sort of special, somebody just being himself in the world of professional wrestling. I started training in Minneapolis. There's a place called the 7th Street Gym, and there was a wrestler there by the name of Eddie Sharkey. And they had a ring in the back of this weightlifting gym that they trained people at night. And I was training there lifting weights, and there was some people from the older AWA that were there. They asked me to train because they knew I had wrestled in college, and I was doing pretty good in the weightlifting as far as strength. So they were pretty interested in me being with them. So I joined up with them, and I trained for about 6 to 8 months. Finally finished up the training, which was pretty rough. And then I sent some pictures out to different promoters all over the country. Leroy McGurk was the first one that said, okay, come on down and wrestle for me. And he was in Louisiana territory, Oklahoma territory. The office was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that's where I started in my career in professional wrestling. On February 20th of 1978, when I wrestled Billy Superstar Graham in Madison Square Garden. That was something that comes up just about every time I talk to somebody that's been a follower of the wrestling business. And after that match, I became the WWF champion. I was really worried prior to that match if the people were going to accept me. I came from Princeton, Minnesota, which is a real small town. There was only 2,500 people in the town. There was 2,700 people in Madison Square Garden that night. My favorite move was always the cross-face chicken wing. And the chicken wing has been in wrestling for a number of years, especially in amateur wrestling. It goes back to the beginning of wrestling. And then another thing in amateur wrestling, they have the crossface where you put your wrist across the guy's chin and turn his head sideways. I was the first one in 1982 to clasp my hands with both of those holds on, and that's why they call it the crossface chicken wing. The biggest injuries that I had happened in 1973. I was in a battle royal in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and the place where I trained at, it didn't have a ring that was up on stilts. The ring was maybe on blocks, but only 6 inches off the floor where I trained. So I didn't learn how to take a fall over the top rope and land on the floor where it was a 4-foot drop. It was just going over the top rope, and then the floor was right there almost. It didn't have that drop down when the ring wasn't up. So I took somebody threw me over the top rope, and I went over the top rope, and I hit my hip on the side of the ring. And I got a bruise from my knee up to my ribs. And it really, I still feel the injury today. I have to say the most important person to me was Vince McMahon Sr. He put me in the position where I could support my family. And like I said before, send my daughter to the best schools I could. But the reason I liked him so much and respected him so much is because you didn't have to worry about signing a contract with him. All you had to do was reach out and shake his hand, and he gave you your word. I left Princeton, Minnesota with $20 in my pocket in a 1968 green Chevrolet. My mom and dad weren't wealthy. They gave me a big hug and said, good luck. And I had dollar signs going through my head because I thought I was going to be making a lot of money in the wrestling world. I made a reservation at the Sheraton that night because I thought I was going to make all this money. Well, I wrestled. I sat around. Everybody got paid, and I was just a new guy on the block, and they paid me $5. And later on, I realized that they were trying to discourage me. They were trying to make me quit. They were trying to break me. But obviously that night I couldn't afford to stay at the Sheraton, so I ended up staying in the trunk of my car. And I got through that night, but then the next night I was in the trunk of my car also. It ended up where I was sleeping in the trunk of my car for almost a year.
I don't have an opponent tonight. I haven't wrestled for years. Where are you coming from? I am out of the wrestling business. And the people still love me. They want me. I'm not wrestling tonight. But if I were, I'd put them in the crossface chicken wing. I thought we already had that discussion. You're a bigger plebeian. You're quagmired in a sea of hypocrisy. Sit up straight out there! You're starting to agitate me, and I'm here to agitate you. Good night. Mr. Backlund's going home.
You know, nowadays, if you talk to a wrestler, if they do an interview with him, the first thing that come up is, what's your gimmick? Or you're this gimmick. Well, you know, that's what was so unique and different about me. First of all, I didn't have a gimmick. The gimmick I had was me. That is truly me, the way I acted, the intensity, to be ferocious, to be aggressive. When a guy's down, I'd kick him. I'd kick him harder. I had a bodybuilder's body, 20 and a half inch arms, body fat of 5% or less. And I used this and I incorporated that, which made me so much different than anybody else. And that's why I hold so many records today. The largest attendance that ever watched an outdoor wrestling match was myself and Hulk Hogan. 78,000 people, still stands today. I owe a lot to Eddie Graham for giving me that opportunity, and also for Hiro Masuda, who trained me for 8 months, 5 days a week, and put me through you know what. And it was the toughest thing that I've ever done. I mean, I've been to 4 days in the NFL camps, same thing in college, high school. It didn't come close to what they put me through. They tested me. They tested my will. They wanted to see if I was tough enough. They knew I was an athlete, but they didn't know if I had what it took to be a professional wrestler. To wrestle in front of the largest crowd ever in professional wrestling outdoors in Toronto, Canada, was one of the big thrills. But I think most of all might have been the first time I went to Madison Square Garden, sold it out. First WrestleMania, probably the best WrestleMania that there ever will be. It's just the hype and the electricity everywhere in the United States that we used to go for that first WrestleMania. It was amazing. You would have thought that it was a heavyweight fight. One time an old fella told me, he said, you know, if you don't say who you are and if you can't show them who you are in the ring, then you'll never really mount to nothing. And that's how I took that. So every night when I went out there, I made it a point to outshine anybody in the ring. I made all the attention on me. I didn't even care about anybody else. It was all about me, because I knew down the road it was money in the bank. And that's what I did. A lot of my moves and everything that I did was totally different than the way it used to be. And that's why I think I helped change what wrestling is today. And of course, it needs another change, and that's to be back the way I was in the 80s. If you're going to get in this business, you need to bring something to the table. You know, if you're 5'9" and you're 5'6", or you're 6 foot and you got a 38-inch waist and you're fat and you don't work out, Come on, man, get real with yourself. Do you think people are going to come and pay to watch you wrestle? You got to be something special. You know, you got to be a giant. You got to have 20-inch arms. You got to be a freak. Was there anybody that was equal to me as far as talent, being aggressive, being vicious, or any of these things? It would have to be a person that possibly played college football, or even pro football, that had that intensity, that had that will to win. Maybe somebody that might have been an Army Ranger or in the Navy SEALs. It would have to be somebody of that caliber to even tickle my feathers, you know. Everybody else was, it was just another walk in the park. But I liked a good, tough match, and I only had a couple of them in my 25 years of wrestling, and both of them were against myself. The first time that I wrestled Hulk Hogan, I believe it was in Poughkeepsie, New York, at a TV. And we were partners at the time, but he got the big head, you know. He wouldn't call me back when I, you know, left messages. And finally, when we got to the ring, and one thing led to another, they ended up carrying him out in a stretcher after I pile drove him. And I would say from that time on, and that was, you know, I like that because I like hurting people to start with. And doing that for him and just to teach him a lesson, you know, a lesson that his mama and daddy should have done a long time ago, and I had to do it.
So in other words, you want me just to go off again, is that it? Well, let me tell you something, Hogan. If I tell you a mosquito can pull a plow, hook him up. If there's two things that I can't stand, it's a dog chasing cars and a broken down wrestler chasing me. Hogan, you got a little of both in you. I'm going to break you and I'm going to spank you like your mama should have done a long time ago.
My accomplishments, I think probably the thing that does mean the most to me is the respect that I have, the respect amongst the other wrestlers, and whether they like me or not, the respect of the promoters that I've been with. The bottom line is that, you know, I helped make careers. I mean, I made Hulk Hogan what he is today, and everybody else that ever stepped in the ring with me. I was a very, very emotional, aggressive, vicious, all these things wrapped up in one. And back in the late 70s, in the early 80s, they didn't have anybody like that. I had the body for it. I had the right mind for it. I had the intensity. I had a lot of things that I've watched on TV that a lot didn't have. I was a rebel type guy. I mean, I don't mind telling you. I spoke up for myself. I thought, you know, I have that right to do that, and I did. So I didn't play politics very good. My whole thing was that my ability, and I would outdo anybody that we had. And that's what I did, and that's how I kept my job. I got to the point that they couldn't get rid of me, no matter what. First WrestleMania was probably the greatest thing, you know, to see Muhammad Ali and him sucker punch me when I wasn't, you know, even looking at him. You know, what kind of guy would do that but Muhammad Ali? You know, Cyndi Lauper and Hogan and Mr. T and all these people. You know, the people all came there for one reason, that was to see Mr. Wonderful. That's the bottom line. It's the same way in Toronto where I drew 78,000 people came to watch Mr. Wonderful for the same reason that you're going to buy this video game. You come to buy it. You come to buy it to see Mr. Wonderful. Life on the road. Life on the road. 300 plus days a year. A lot of ribs we played on each other. It was fun. In the beginning, yeah, it was fun. You know, there would be four of us sitting in a car. Sometimes you need to get paid, you know, making $15 a night. I didn't have a silver spoon, you know. I wasn't born with that. I mean, everything I had to earn. I had to fight for. To get in all the politics and all the gaga and the goo-goo, that wasn't really for me. And we had fun, sure. I mean, I've had my bags all locked up with padlocks and stuff, and I had 20 locks on a bag, and then they take and nail your boots to the ceiling, and oh, you know, they used to put inch powder in your underwear, you know, after the shower, and then underneath your shirt, all sprinkle it all over the place. You know, we used to do all kind of little things, but in the beginning it was a lot of fun. But toward the end of my career, it's work, being away from your family, away from your kids, just not being able to go to church and not being able to do the right things you need to do in life. If you play a contact sport, you're going to have injuries. And if you don't have injuries, then you must be sitting on the bench. That's the way I look at it. And I never was a bench warmer, and nor was I ever a water boy. I was out there with my head. I was sticking my head in there. These are things that you need to look at in a lot of these young kids out there that, have this embedded in their mind that they want to do this. And even football, because you'll pay down the road. And quite frankly, my advice to you would be is use it up here. And use your brains, because using your body, you could use your brain forever. Your body, you can't. And I thought I was invincible. And when I got hurt, it was career ending. Ending my career, period.
The wrestling business, when I got in, we kind of changed the face of wrestling. We were the first guys. I was 300 pounds. My partner was 270 pounds at the time, and that were doing things that 180-pound guys were doing. That was a struggle in itself because nobody wanted to do the moves that we wanted to do because we were bigger guys doing them. We've been really blessed in this wrestling business. Hawk and I have achieved things that no other team will ever achieve in the history of professional wrestling, because on the way of everything is going today, from airlines all grouping together, going under one umbrella, to wrestling businesses are going under 1 to 2 companies. You will not have 15 to 20 wrestling promotions again anymore. We've won almost, with the exception of maybe one, every title possible that you could win in tag team wrestling. Hawk and I have won. We were tag team of the decade. We were voted tag team of the year 7 of the first 10 years we were in wrestling. We just recently got voted tag team of the century about a year ago. So we've had a very good, prosperous career. And we are proud to say nobody will ever be able to achieve and win the awards we won. Without a doubt, the 4 horsemen with Ric Flair, Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, and Ole Anderson, and J.J. Dillon, the manager, they gave us our most memorable matches we've ever had. They did more for our career than anybody did in the history of professional wrestling. Every time you wrestle another top guy or a famous star in this wrestling business, you learn something. This is the kind of business that if you think you learn everything in the first year, you might as well get out because there's nothing else for you to do. Well, my best partner is my partner, the Hawk. Hawk's been my partner for my whole career, and I wouldn't think of myself, couldn't even imagine myself with any other partner besides Hawk. In this business, it's hard because you put 110% into every match. There's certain guys you like to work with more than others, but every match is a special match, and everyone's got its own significant moment, whether it's something that causes you to laugh or you do a great move or whatever it is. Cooperation is the number one thing that makes an opponent a good opponent or someone great to work with. When a guy is willing to do, you got a common goal to make entertainment for the people. When you are willing to each of you to sacrifice your body and trust that in that other person's hands, that makes a guy a great opponent to work with. If I knew somebody would want to get into professional wrestling, I'd tell them to think long and hard before about making this decision. Today, the wrestling business is totally different than getting in when I got into it. Today, they're going to send you to developmental camps. You may go and be in a developmental area for 5 or 10 years before you even get a break. Hawk and I went through a camp, sort of a camp here in Minneapolis with a guy named Ed Sharkey. Ed Sharkey was the same guy that taught Jesse Ventura how to wrestle. We were all big guys that went through the camp, and Ed really didn't want to get in the ring with us too much because we were too big. Well, Hawk and I still wrestle now. We one of the few guys that, what we did in our wrestling careers, we never got burnt out in one area too much. We would stay in an area for 2 years, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, and then we would go to Japan for 2 years, and come back, go somewhere else for 2 years, and then back to the Orient, and back and forth, and back and forth. We wrestle now. Like I said, we just won the IWS International Wrestling Superstars Championship. We plan to take that around the world and defend those belts, I should say. I'm involved heavily in coaching in the area that I am at here in Whiteside, Minnesota. I do football. I've done football, hockey, baseball. I've done them for baseball for 14 years here with my oldest son through, and Now my other boy is getting to an age where I don't need to coach him anymore. He'll be in high school for Wayzata, which is a great program. And my daughter, I coach her in softball now, and it'll probably be my last year because she's getting to the stage where she doesn't need me to do it anymore. You know, she's somebody else to coach her. So I'm blessed in that respect because I've always given back to the community. I like giving back to the community like that. I like being part of helping kids learn. I own a gym here. Hawk and I own a gym with a guy named Jim Younger called The Gym in Minnesota and Plymouth. And we help train people, and I do a lot of youth sports training, and a lot of my son's friends, when they need help, they come to me and I ask them questions on training, and, you know, and I answer them for them, and I take care of things for it. So I'm involved in the community in that aspect. And when I'm done wrestling, I hope to be a full-time coach somewhere. I mean, I know sports. I know the sport of baseball. I know the sport of football really well, and I'd love to be a college coach someday or even a pro coach, to be honest with you. That's what I love to do. Well, they always say that it's never over until the fat lady sings. And when she does finally sing for me and for my partner, I hope that we were remembered in the wrestling business as, which I think we have achieved today, as the greatest tag team that has ever faced any opponent in the history of the professional wrestling business.
Well, I broke into business in Hamilton, Ontario. Like I said, I had boxed for a while and got tired of it. I wanted to try wrestling. I went to a wrestling school. It was called Jack Wentworth, Hamilton, Ontario. I trained there for about a year and a half. And I had my first match in CFTO and Toronto TV. And from there, I went on to have a wrestling career. And at first, it was very hard. It wasn't making the money that these kids are making today. It was when you traveled, there was always 4 or 5 in a car, or there was 4 or 5. One would go in and get the hotel room, and 2 or 3 others would sneak in because it was hard. But when we did make it, it made us appreciate it a lot more. Well, the one that would help me, I would say, would be, he's not living today, Bobo Brazil. When I first started, he guided me, he helped me, he took me to the gym, showed me different moves, he showed me the ropes, he showed me what to expect going from town to town. He just spent a lot of time. He took me under his wing, and I never ever forgot him for that because he was the first one to take me out of Canada, to take me to California. And he went to the promotion in California and said, hey, I got this kid here, I want to take a look at him. And really, he didn't have to do that, and the standards today, they're not going to do that. It's like, I got mine, you get yours. And that's why I would never ever forget him till the day I died. I figured either I'm going to make it or I don't want to get an 8-to-5 job the rest of my life. And it was very, very hard. And I had some good opponents. I had some real bad ones. I had some that tried to hurt me. And you get that in, because it's professional, not personal jealousy. But I can say I survived. Here I am, for what it's worth. You know, wrestling there's a lot of injuries that you have to cover up in the public. You know, I've had my ribs cracked, broke. I've had my nose broke. Some of these teeth are mine. I guess they're all mine. I paid for them, but I had some of my teeth knocked out. I have broken ankles, knees. And the bad point about our sport is we have to go back in the next night. Or, we can't get a knee injury and say, I got to take 6 weeks off. They shoot it up, and away you go. And, yes, wrestlers do get hurt. It is sports entertainment, but I'll guarantee you when you go over those ropes and hit the cement floor, there's nothing fake about that. You're going to feel it. And you're always sore. So I used to say my philosophy was, a day without pain was like a day without sunshine. You just got to learn to live through it and keep on going. Well, I never really had a gimmick. What I had was I used to do the shuffle and the jabs because I came up with that because I was a fighter first. I was a professional boxer, and I left boxing to get into professional wrestling. And I kind of one day just started throwing the jabs and doing the shuffle, and the people really went crazy for it, so that's how it caught on. First year I was Rookie of the Year. I won a Canadian Championship. I won United States. I won many tag team titles. The one that sticks out in my mind is the most when me and Tony Atlas became the first Afro-American to become world tag team champions. And that meant so much to me, and it really means a lot to me today. That's something that they took away my belt and title, but they can never ever take away the memories. Well, I'm running SmackDown Wrestling Academy. I'm training wrestlers for the future. You know, out of every 10 guys I get, probably 4 makes it. What makes a great wrestler, get into that point, is somebody that lives it, sleeps it, dreams it, trains, and nothing comes first except wrestling. And to make a good opponent, you got to be able to feel it. When I can go in the ring with somebody and I can feel their body language, I can know what move they're going to do before they do it, and they're going to know what move I can do. Now, that's a very, very chosen few. But there is some out there, like I can name 4 or 5 of them, I could probably name 10 of them, that are great wrestlers. I mean, superstars I'm talking about. And how many superstars do you have of the hundreds of wrestlers you got? You don't have that many. But that's what makes it. When they got pain, when they're hurt, they go in anyway. You got to learn to suck it up and go, not sit and saying my back is sore, my knee's sore. When they come and tell me that, I tell them straight to their face, you want sympathy? Go home to your family and get it. I don't give it here. And if they come back, then I know they got what it takes. That's what I'm doing, and I really enjoy doing it. And I don't think there's anything else I would want to do. Because when I can watch somebody, or like my son, The Rock, I can say maybe I put something back in the business. I hope to be remembered as not a legend, but somebody that brought entertainment and enjoyment to the fans' life. I hope to be remembered by training individuals like John, my nephew, my son, The Rock. I hope to be remembered in that way. I don't want to be remembered as a big superstar. I don't want to be remembered as somebody better than anybody else. I was just country trying to make it in the big city. And that's what I want to be remembered as, that, hey, he's a guy, he's a human being like me, and he's down to earth. This goes to all of you that you think you can wrestle The Rock and you want a piece of me. Well, you can get a piece of me anytime you want. But to get some of this, you better bring a whole lot of that. And this is the real Rocky talking to you, not that jabroni Rocky behind the camera. And how do I know? Because the real Rock said so.
I grew up in the business. You know, my father wrestled. I'm a second-generation wrestler, more like a third. I grew up in the locker rooms, you know, in the dressing room, in the ring. Other kids had jungle gyms in their backyard. I had a wrestling ring. You know, so I played, you know, wrestling's been my life, all my life, you know. Being a second-generation wrestler is both positive and negative. For me, a lot of doors were open quickly because of the name of my father and my brothers. But at the same time, it was very hard because you had to live up to expectations. When you first start, it's a struggle, you know. It's a big struggle, you know, mentally, and also for a lot of the boys, because you're put in matches that, I know I was put in matches in Mexico where I wasn't ready for. You know, I was put in semis and main events real quick. You know, I wasn't ready for that. You know, it helped me in the long run, but I just wasn't ready for that right then and there. So I had to fight my way, literally, in the ring sometimes. You know, because the other wrestlers didn't feel I deserved to be there, and they were right. Well, the belts that have meant the most to me, I guess, were the Cruiserweight title, WCW. The tag team titles with my old partner, Art Barr, God rest his soul, in Mexico. The titles from WWF, which were the European and Intercontinental, both of them. Yeah, they meant a lot to me, you know, because in an organization, they don't just give it to you, you know. There's 2 reasons why they give you a belt. You know, they let you hold it, or let you carry a belt, is better put that way. Number 1, because they want to make you, you know, they want to bring your status up. Or number 2, because you can carry it and make other people with it. Those are great honors, you know. But I know for me too, you know, I got to remember that with or without a belt, I said I'm going to go produce the best that I can. And a belt doesn't make a wrestler. A wrestler makes the belt. The wrestlers that I love to work with are the ones that bring out the best in me. Chris Benoit, he brings out the best in me, and he's one of the best in the business. Another one that brings out the best in me is Dean Malenko, Rey Mysterio Jr., Liger. You know, these are all people that I've been able to have good matches with. El Hijo del Santo in Mexico. You know, it just, for me, these are wrestlers that have always been, you know, you have that chemistry with them that you just don't have with you don't have that chemistry with too many people. You can have great matches, but there's only certain people that you can go out there and just have that ultimate match with, you know. Talking about injuries in this business, I mean, you go through injuries all the time. One that stands out in my mind is when I tore my pec wrestling Dean Malenko in a pay-per-view. You know, and went up to the top, and I jumped out on him. You know, he tried to duck and shoved me into the railing as I landed, but, you know, he just didn't get out of the way totally, and my arm caught his head here, and it just, boom, snapped my chest back, and, you know, I just remember that one, you know, because I was out for 4 months with that. In my life, I've experienced addiction. You know, I have the disease of addiction, and I've had problems with drugs and alcohol. And what's important in my life now is God and my recovery. I take it one day at a time, man. And I'm thankful to God that I have a second chance at life, and that I have another opportunity to present myself in the ring and to give the best that I can for the fans and for something that I love to do. What I'm doing in life now is keeping it simple. The advice that I would give somebody that wanted to get into the business is basically the advice that I am learning in my life. It's advice that you use in all aspects of life, which is you get out of it what you put into it. Orale, ese. You want to get in the ring with me, Holmes? Ese. What's the matter with you, man? You know, that's pretty brave of you. But hold on, vato loco, because you're in for the ride of your life. The one specific person that has helped me throughout my career has been the one that's helped me throughout my whole life. Right away, I think of my father, but he passed away just as I started to wrestle. Everything that he said to me before, I still remember today. You know, he gave me advice that has lasted. You know, I'll always remember my dad for that. But the one that's really supported me and been the one that has carried my dad's advice to me has been my mother. You look at her, she is the mom of 4 wrestlers, okay? The wife of a wrestler, the sister of wrestlers, the grandmother of a wrestler, the aunt of wrestlers. She's been in wrestling all her life. It's surrounded her too. She gives me great advice. Those are the 2 people, you know, my parents. You know, I grew up in the business. They've been in the business and just so supportive all the time. Life on the road for a wrestler, the ribbing, the traveling, the popularity. It's hard. You know, a lot of people see the glitz and glamour on TV of wrestling, and they don't know what goes behind it. They don't know that we go to sleep for 2 hours. You know, you get up, you take off from home in the morning, you get a plane, land, go straight to the gym, work out. From there, go grab something to eat, while you're in the car sometimes, you know. And that's if we have time to eat. Go straight to the building. Work that night. Okay, drive to the next town, go to the hotel, get about 2-3 hours of sleep because you got to get up or at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to catch the next plane out. I mean, you know, that's just the travel. Then you got all the ribbing and the politics, you know. I mean, there's a lot of egos that go on behind the scenes. You know, it's just like in any other business. You know, and the popularity, that's rough. You know, at first it's really neat, you know, because you're getting recognized and all that. And then you hate it because you got no privacy. And now I've accepted it. It's part of the package. You know, if anything, I'm grateful to have it now because I guess the day they don't recognize me, it's time to get out of the game. If I were a fan, you know, I would believe one of my most memorable matches in my career would be one with Chris Benoit. It was the semifinals for the J Cup, you know, the junior tour in Japan. And I remember we were on before Liger and I think it was Samurai in Liger's hometown. And we went out there and we tore the house down. We just tore the house down for 20 minutes. You know, we went on a long time. I think it was 23 minutes. Busted ass. And, you know, very physical. And, you know, just that, you know, we had the people on their feet. You know, it was a great experience. What a rush. You know, when we came back, you know, everybody was congratulating us. And I feel bad for Liger, but, you know, the rest of the matches, you know, it just wasn't there, you know. So, you know, it was a good feeling because you went out there and you stole the night, you know. And that doesn't happen. Well, it does to some people, you know, but it doesn't happen a lot, you know. So when you get those nights, it's really a special night. For me, what makes a wrestler a great opponent is, first of all, his attitude, his work ethic. You know, not a lot of wrestlers are blessed with the talent that other wrestlers have. But there's wrestlers out there that have some of the best work ethics, and they're out there busting their ass. And that's what makes a great worker. That's what makes a good wrestler. A lot of people look at the big injuries. Those aren't really the ones that are the problem because you'll heal up from those. It's the little ones that become the problem because those become chronic injuries. Those are the ones that keep coming back. Those are the ones that you got to live with every day and feel that pain every day and that discomfort every now and then. And you keep re-injuring those injuries. You know, those are the ones that are the big ones. The specific ribbing story that comes to mind is the rib that was done on me. You know, they still deny it, but I know it was them. I don't even think Benoit had something to do with it, but still to this day, he doesn't say, you know, he swears he doesn't. So it was a trip to Japan, and, well, I don't want to, how do you say, we overindulged ourselves. And I fell asleep on the plane, and the Nasty Boys proceeded to shave my eyebrows and cut my bangs and shave a nice little triangle on my head. And I had to go wrestle in front of 18,000 people like that. Looked like Frankenstein.
I was working out at the YMCA outside Detroit, Michigan, actually at Windsor, Ontario, Canada. I was working out. The guy in another room, the mat on the floor, he's a wrestling coach. He come in and said, I can put a hold on and make you scream. Get away, get away. So after about 2 weeks, he's bugging us. I said, okay, go put a hold on me. He did. He put a hold on me and made me scream. So he said, look, I wrestle professionally at night. Why don't you guys take up wrestling? So I took up wrestling. I went to school there, started training and training and training. Went to St. Louis to wrestle. And I made a big impact on the people there, the crowd there and everything like that. They got me traveling around. I traveled. So I enjoyed it very, very much. On my whole career, I made it into professional wrestling. Like 14 trips to Japan. I traveled. I lived in Australia for a while. That's from Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Indonesia. That's what all the Kowloon. That's all the towns around throughout there. I enjoyed it. Somebody asked me if I would live the life all over again, what would you do? Become an engineer? No, become a professional wrestler. Wrestling guy by the name of Yukon Eric. I tied Yukon Eric's leg over the second rope and his toe into the bottom rope. So he's trapped there. So I climb up top, I'm trying to jump on him. The referee's underneath me, untying him. I have a picture of that. He's untie his leg. I jumped over the referee. As he's, Yukon Eric saw me coming down, he turned away. My shin bone scraped his cheek so tight, it ripped the side, his whole ear, the collar ripped it off the side of his head, rolled across the room like a golf ball. And blood spurting all over the place. His heart beat, boom, the blood spurted, boom. Somebody threw a towel at him, he put a towel on his head, and was soaked in a few seconds, the towel was soaked. Whenever he pushed me back, he looked at me, what's happening, what's happening? I said, I just tore his ear off. He did, what? He looked down, picked it up off the ground. Holy mackerel. That's his, still throbbing. That's his ear. Yukon Eric walks over to the corner into the dressing room. The referee says, what do I do now? Raise my arm. I'm the only one left here. Oh, okay. Raise my arm as a winner. Walk to the hospital and walk up the second steps and look down the hallway. There's a room open door. A bunch of people in there. And that's Yukon Eric's room. Looked across the room. Here's Yukon Eric sitting on the edge of the bed, feet on the floor, his head bandaged around and around and around. First thought that came to my mind was Humpty Dumpty sitting on the wall. So I started laughing. So I put my arms up in the air and went like that. I walked out. The next day, the Montreal Gazette, this was Friday, Montreal Gazette, Saturday, headline. Vlada Kowalski visited Yukon Eric in the hospital and laughs at him. The next following Wednesday, I'm walking towards the ring, people screaming, hollering at me. You monster, animal, you killer, you're this, that. Hey, I like that name. From that day on, I did change my name to Killer Kowalski. The only time things are real is when you're at home. When you're home with the family, it's for real. Wake up in the morning, you go to work, you walk out the door, you're walking out on the stage. Don't lay around that ring. Make the people in the ruck see what you it is. You're fighting for your life, and your opponent is the same thing. So don't just lay, when guy punches you, don't lay there and moan and groan. He punches you, fight right back with him. The whole thing is, make it realistic. It's one time I'm wrestling in Los Angeles, California. I'm going to retire in 2 years. There's one bodybuilder walks in. Big arms, muscles, holy mackerel. He walks in, here's the referee, woman wrestling, guy in the corner. The referee says, the bodybuilder says, oh, give me a break. I'll take it easy, he's going to retire in a short. Yeah. So I go to the ring first. People start booing me. I walk in the ring, I sit in the corner and shout to them like this. He starts walking in, people start cheering him. Hey, this guy's going to beat the heck out of me. Well, the match starts. In 4 minutes, I never had a short match. I'll give the people the money's worth. In 4 minutes, him. In 10 minutes, I quit. Give him the match. I quit. Referee said, what do you say, Walter? Follow it, I'm not even warmed up yet. Kept going. For 4 minutes went by again. He's crawling on his hands and knees, crawling on his knees to the edge of the ring, put over the apron, threw up twice on the floor. The people at the ring said, oh my goodness. So I got up and walked away. So I grabbed him by the ankle, pulled him back in. Pulled him up off the ground, whacked him. Pulled him up the ground, whacked him. Finally, referee said, Waller, what? He's turning blue. Holy mackerel, he's dying. The match ended right there and there. All these guys watching me perform came out there and carried him back to the dressing room. So I looked at the people and gave me a few motions at people. I walked back to the dressing room. Walked over to him, looked down at him. He says, I don't know who you were. I was going to remember me for the rest of your life. Watch out. Because I can shoot in that ring. If you mess with me, I'm going to have you carried out of that ring on a stretcher. Because I'm not going to have you lay around doing nothing. I'm going to have you grab a hold on me and doing nothing. I'm going to cry in that ring against you. I'm going to go and go and go. So you better say a prayer before we get in that ring. That's me. Killer Kowalski. Living up to the name, a legend, Walter Killer Kowalski. One time, I'm wrestling this one guy, he's one of the big stars, and I'm going, he jumped out of the ring. So the referee's going to count him up? No. I jumped on top of I climbed the top turnbuckle, try to get a jump down, and my opponent walking around. The referee, instead of counting him up, started counting me to get off that top turnbuckle, get back in the ring. So he started counting me. So I jumped back in the ring. I jumped around like a kangaroo. That was one of my favorite moves, kangaroo hop. So I was doing the hop. I looked at the referee and I threatened to punch him. And he said, "You touch me, I'll have you disqualified and you suspended from wrestling." So I stepped back and I jumped around. In the meantime, my opponent finally got back in the ring. So as I took the whole thing was, I made the people notice me. I took the whole action away from him. I was the guy who increased the speed of wrestling. At my day, guys to grab a hold on to the hold, hold on to the hold. Today you put a hold on, you call it boring. But in my day, I didn't. The guy kicked my leg, I just didn't go down and fall. I hopped around on my good leg and pretending I'm trying to, massage my good leg. He kicked me again, kicked my arm. I saw like this, and he come back to try to hit me. I turned on him, leaped at him, hit both forearms on the chest. I got up right away and stomped him, pulled him up off the ground, I pounded him again. Now, just to show you, I had other guys jump out of the ring, they pooped because I kept going. Finally, my reputation got out. So it got out, said, "Boy, you're in shape when you're wrestling Kowalski." Ohio, sitting in the dressing room. And everybody sitting over there looking at me. I said, what's the matter with you guys? Well, we found out a month and a half ago you're coming down here. Well, I went to the gym, start working out so we can look half decent against you in the ring. Thank you very much. Why don't you start working out before you would come down? Keep yourself in shape. Well, we didn't have to until you came around. Then we have to get in shape because we know what's going to happen to us against you in that ring. This thing really happened. I go in the ring first. I'm just standing in the corner there. And one woman got up from ringside, and she looked up at me, and I just looked down at her, and she stabbed me in my leg right here, and ripped it right down to my boot. And I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, looked down at my leg, bleeding, looked at her, didn't do nothing, didn't say a word. She was so embarrassed at what she did. Her and her husband, sitting at ringside, got up and left the building. And I just looked at the people like this. They thought I was going to cry, scream, or holler. Didn't say a word. I just took the whole thing. So therefore, what happened? I'm a villain. People supposed to scream at me. Instead, they applauded me. My favorite moves were the claw hold. I used to have the stomach, the claw hold. There's a pressure point between the ribs right up here, pressure point. I was able to put my thumb there and squeeze so hard, and I twisted, and my wrestler used to scream at me. I travel alone. When I'm traveling, I had one hand on the wheel. I had a tennis ball in my lap. Take the tennis ball with one hand, squeeze. Put the tennis ball back in my lap, grab the wheel, grab the other hand, squeeze. I got to the point where I was terrified. This was overnight. This was months went by me doing this. I could almost tear a tennis ball in half after a while. But one time, this guy was a radio man. Called me up. He said, "I'd like to have you come down and interview." Invited a bunch of children down to watch. And this guy's going to interview me. So he's interviewing me on the air. We're on the air. He's interviewing me. He said, "Now tell me, how could a claw hold on a stomach hurt? You can't tell me you can hurt anybody on the claw hold in the stomach." I said, "Well, want me to put it on you?" "Sure, go ahead, put it on me." So I grabbed the shirt on the stomach and I twisted. He screamed. Around here, he's screaming. So I'm twisting more. I squeeze. He's screaming. Around here, he's screaming. The children start crying. "Let him go, let him go, let him go." So I finally let him go. We finished the interview, walked out. The next day, he's back on the radio. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Kowalski put a call on me yesterday. It still hurts today." At one time, I had an injury so drastical, I was paralyzed from my neck down. Even today, that's as far as I can move my neck. I live with it. I never cried, bemoaned, never nothing. I just live with the whole thing. I always had it in my mind. What you think you become, what you feel you become, what you say you become. I never demeaned myself. I shot for the moon, I missed, I made a star. That's the way I ended up at. I ended up as one of the big legends in professional wrestling. Think for yourself and be positive about what you think and about what you do. And never demean yourself. Look for yourself as being a winner. You'll become exactly that, a winner.
Well, when I first started wrestling, it was just Harley Race, and there was no name hung to it at all. And then a little later on, the handsome part came in, and that came out of Japan. I was doing an interview with some Japanese press, and I guess I was ignoring this one guy, and he finally hollered at me, "Hey, handsome." And that sounded fairly decent, so I went along with that and was Handsome Harley Race for a number of years. And when I went to the WWF, they had the first King of the Ring, and I won it, wrestling 6 times that night. I became known as the King Harley Race. I started with Gus Karras wrestling on a carnival, taking on all comers throughout the Midwest. You go into an area, and they each little area had their own little bully. So, to make a long story short, if you beat the bully, you got paid, and if you didn't, you didn't. So that's how I kind of got started in this business. Well, there isn't a title from middle 60s through the ending of wrestling before the WWF took it over, title that I don't think I have not held. What makes a wrestler a great opponent? I suppose someone that can go in the ring and stay with you move for move and be able to execute those moves without dropping somebody directly on their head and really, really hurting them. Just the ability to go in the ring with any human being and come out of there having a great match. I guess everyone refers to me as the man that opened wrestling up to the new era. I could take falls from just about anywhere. I could also wrestle on the mat. I was what you call all-inclusive. At one point in time, I don't think there was anything that I couldn't do in the ring. I had a lot of moves in the ring that the guys are still using today. All of the suplexes, starting with the stand-up to the around the arm, around the body. Suplexes were my thing, and that's, they're still using them today. A suplex is being able to take your opponent in any direction, whether it be straight up and over your head, around the body, and bringing him back over. Double arm, where you hook both arms and bring him straight back over. There's different versions of suplexes, but I came up with most of them, and they're still using them today. I had a bunch of the guys at my home in Kansas City, and I had spent the afternoon fixing chili for them to eat that night. Owen Hart came into the house that evening and had decided that he'd have some chili, but he wanted to have some fun with the other guys. So I have a sauce called Insanity sauce. And he had taken his out, and then he took the Insanity and he shook a whole lot of it into the label that the rest of the guys were going to be scooping theirs, thinking he was going to get Mankind or Cactus Jack or Mick Foley, however you want to call him, not knowing that Cactus was going to take the label and stir the chili before he dipped it. So he got everybody in the building, or everybody at our home. The following night, he was in the locker room in Topeka, Kansas, and I walked in with a 250,000 volt stunt gun. And he's standing there stark naked. So his back was turned to me, so I inserted the stunt gun between the cheeks of his behind and squeezed it off, and 250,000 volts went through him, and all he did was just stood there and, kind of did one of those numbers until I quit electrocuted him. I hope to be remembered as one of the better wrestlers in the world. I could have a match in that ring with just about anybody, and to be able to be remembered by your peers as one of the best is the main thing.
It makes absolutely no difference to me who I walk out to that ring tonight to beat, because beat you I will. I am the legend of wrestling. You talk about great? This is great. You talk about the best? This is the best. You talk about the absolute epitome of wrestling. You're looking at him.
Long near the end of my career was when the King came in, and I thought, that's kind of symbolic of what I've done my whole life, being NWA heavyweight champion on 8 different occasions. The King thing kind of fit, so I went along with it and became the first King of the Ring. Well, the most memorable one would be in Kansas City in 1973 when I become world's heavyweight champion the first time, beating one of the Funks, Dory Funk Jr. That would, beyond question, would be the match. Well, I've had a lot of injuries, starting from, that's all steel. I got 4 metal screws in my right knee. A few years ago, I had an artificial hip put in. And just recently, a couple of years ago, I had 5 vertebrae fused in my back. So it's, it takes its toll over the years. I learned to deal with pain at a real early age. I had something wrong with the small of my back going back probably close to 30 years. One leg would pull up almost 2 inches shorter than the other one. And most all the wrestlers of that era knew some chiropractic adjustments. And I myself had studied chiropractic for quite a while. So I'd come into a lot of arenas and say, hey guys, I need you to do something. I'd lay down, put myself in position, and have them rotate my low back, because I'd have one leg that was like a couple inches shorter than the other. It'd go back in place, and I'd go out and wrestle, and next day I'd have to do the same thing again. Well, life on the road was always fun. To this day, I still miss it. The one story that I can tell that kind of encompasses the whole thing was in Minneapolis, Minnesota, back in the 60s when John Valentine was alive and was still right at the top of his game. Jay York, the Alaskan, was around there then, and he was at the top of his. They had just finished wrestling one another, and Valentine was a guy that would love to rib everybody. He had taken Jay's atomizer. Jay had a touch of asthma, and he had put lighter fluid around the edges of it, so that when Jay came in and squirted his throat with this, he sprayed lighter fluid down it. So he's coughing and gagging, and everybody thought he was going to pass out. He went over to his bag, and he pulled out, at that time, I think it wasn't a 357 Magnum. The big one was the 44 Magnum. And they had set this up ahead of time, but none of us knew it. So he turned and shot John Valentine twice in the chest. Valentine exploded backwards into a shower room where the shower was running, and he's laying in there, and we're all thinking he's dead, so he turns the gun around to other people. First one was John Powers, and Powers slid right up the locker saying, oh my God, please, no, no, no. He went on through a couple others. Big K, at that point, was Killer Kowalski, not the one that you're familiar with. Then around to Henning and myself. Well, back during this year, I had been stabbed in Minneapolis, and my life I'd been threatened a lot of times, so I always had a gun on me. So I had Rhett's down in my bag, and I had my gun in my hand. Mine wasn't loaded with blanks, and he knew it. So when the gun came to me, I pointed mine at him and said, I don't think you want this to go any further. And then, of course, the whole rib reversed on him, and he, no, it's a joke, it's a joke. What I'm doing now is I run World League Wrestling, which we run a 5-state area, and we promote events. And we're now on PAX Television out of St. Louis, and hopefully that's going to grow. We also have the Harley Race Academy, which we're in right now, and I train young talent. Some of that talent now is going back and forth to Japan. One just came back from there just recently. There's more scheduled to go the end of this month. But overall, I'm still doing what I love to do.